Romantic Tales. Chapter 189. Yili nodded. Thank you, Your Highness. Your Highness. Yili looked at Princess Anshi and hesitated. Princess Anshi raised her eyebrows and motioned for her to continue. Yili asked softly, I want to find Brother Qingshan as soon as possible. He hasn't written to every family for a long time. Can you tell me where he said he was going when he left? So I can take the guards with me to find him. Princess Anshi looked at her for a long time and frowned. It's not that I don't want to tell you where he is, but I'm looking for him too. Yili guessed happily. Then, has he left Nanjiang and returned to the Central Plains? Princess Anshi shook her head. There are still many things to do in Nanjiang. He won't leave so easily. Besides, if he really left, he would have said goodbye to me. He should have at least left a message. Then will he be in danger? Princess Anshi looked at her awkwardly. After a long time she shook her head. I don't think so. Master Qingshan is very smart. He'll be able to deal with anything. But Brother Qingshan doesn't know martial arts. He can't even beat Lin Han, who is by my side, Yili shouted anxiously. Princess Anshi comforted her softly. Trust me. He'll be fine. I promise. Yili's eyes flickered and she looked up at her with hope. Really? You promise? Princess Anshi nodded heavily. As the Princess of Nanzhao, I promise that he'll be fine. You just have to wait in the mansion. You'll see Master Qingshan soon. Yili nodded. Okay, I believe you, Your Highness. But I'm going to find Brother Qingshan. Princess Anshi looked at her helplessly. You can only stay in the capital. You can't run around. If Master Qingshan comes back and can't find you. I know. Thank you, Your Highness. Outside the door of the guest courtyard, the smile on Princess Anshi's face gradually faded. As he walked towards his courtyard, he turned around and asked the person following behind him, Have you investigated Miss Chu's side? The man beside her replied in a low voice, Your Highness, we've checked. Miss Chu only entered the city yesterday when it was almost dark. After entering the city, they stayed at the most famous inn in the capital. This morning, after checking out of the hotel, he asked around for the location of the princess residence and came straight here. However, she didn't use Chu Liuyun's identity. Instead, she used Su Yun and Lin Han. Princess Anshi nodded. It's not too much to use an alias when you're outside. Anything else? The man shook his head and said, There's nothing else. If we want to verify Miss Chu's identity, I'm afraid we'll have to send someone to the Dechu state. It'll take at least a month for a round trip. Princess Anshi shook her head. I'm afraid we don't have the time. She must know Qingshan and she must be very familiar with him. It was more important to find Qingshan as soon as possible. Whether it was him or not would be clear once they found him. Just send someone to keep an eye on them during this time. Yes. Anything else? The man hesitated for a moment and said, When we went to check on Miss Chu, we found that 3 people from the Central Plains came to the inn yesterday. Their names were nothing special, but they might not be their real names. Does it have anything to do with Miss Chu? It doesn't seem like it. They arrived 4 hours earlier than Miss Chu, and one of them went back to his room to rest after eating. The other 2 went out and came back after Miss Chu checked in. We haven't seen them yet. Then don't bother about them first. It's normal for people from the Central Plains to enter and leave the city from time to time. This is the responsibility of the capital's guard general. It'll be troublesome if we interfere too much. Yes. Your Highness, the king wants to see you. Got it. I'll go to the palace immediately. Yili brought a poetry book back to her room and sat down to read it peacefully. Princess Anshi could become Nanzhao's crown princess because she wasn't a brainless princess. At least, the people she sent to keep an eye on her knew their limits and wouldn't let the guests feel offended. Yili couldn't be bothered to say anything more. If Princess Anshi really believed her completely, then she would have to doubt the crown princess's brain. Princess Anshi left the residence. An heir came in and said in a low voice. Yili nodded and said softly, That princess isn't simple. Don't get too close to her lest you get misunderstood. An heir frowned and looked outside the door. She doesn't believe us at all. Isn't it completely useless for us to stay here and make it difficult for us to escape? Yili shook her head. Princess Anshi must know where Big Brother went. Even if she can't find Big Brother now, she clearly isn't worried about Big Brother's safety. What has Big Brother been doing since he entered Nanzhao? Can you find out? An heir nodded. This subordinate will give it to you before tomorrow. Yili nodded and frowned as she stared at the book in her hand. Her mind had already flown far away. Big Brother clearly hadn't been taken away. He had gone somewhere of his own accord. But he didn't return at the time he agreed with Princess Anxi. Big Brother didn't have any interests or enemies in Nanzhao, so he could only have gone for Princess Anxi. Even so, according to Big Brother's meticulous nature as inherited from eldest uncle, he shouldn't have left behind no clues. The clues? Where were they? She threw a piece of paper on the table. Yili took out her usual charcoal pen and quickly wrote and drew on the paper. In his mind he kept thinking about all kinds of complicated information about Nanjiang that the secret guard had sent over last night. He quickly drew a chart of the distribution of forces in Nanjiang on the paper, and analyzed the relationship between the various forces in the capital of Nanzhao. After a while, a large piece of paper was filled with all kinds of simple symbols and strange characters. An heir looked strangely at the things he couldn't understand and didn't ask. Yili Gu put down the pen and looked at herself on the paper, stunned. It wasn't that she deliberately wanted to guard against anyone. In fact, what was written on this paper wasn't a secret. It was just that she had re-summarized the information she saw last night. Looking at the paper that was fluently mixed with at least 4 languages, Yili couldn't help but smile helplessly in her heart. In fact, she had been missing her previous life. She could be a quiet and perfect princess, but she didn't like it. So after leaving the capital, she deliberately avoided Mo Xiuyao's protection and chose to travel in a dangerous way. Putting aside the chaotic thoughts in her mind, Yili stared at the paper on the table for a long time. Then she frowned and asked, "Why is there no news about the Saintess of Nanjiang?" The clear drawings in front of her showed that they had very little information about the Saintess of Nanjiang, an important person in Nanjiang. Even if there was, it was only a few words. It was the most basic information. It was almost the same as what she knew in the capital. Only her age, name and even appearance weren't clear. If the Saintess of Nanjiang was fighting with the crown princess to usurp power, there wouldn't be so little information. Chapter 190. An heir said, "The Saintess of Nanjiang is known as the patron saint of Nanjiang. She is enshrined in the Saintess Hall 5 li outside of Nanzhao City. Except for major events and festivals, the Saintess will not leave the Saintess Hall. Usually only the 36 maids chosen to serve the Saintess can approach the Saintess. The current Saintess, Xu Manlin, succeeded at the age of 15. In the past 8 years she has left the temple 10 times, but each time she wore a mask. It is said that in the entire Nanzhao, except for the previous Saintess who has entered the Holy Land of Nanjiang, no one knows what she looks like." Yili shook her head. "That is impossible. The current Saintess does not have the right to teach the next Saintess. Then who taught the Saintess? Who raised her when she was young? Who are her parents? And, if no one has seen the Saintess' true face, then who can be sure that the person under the mask is the real Saintess of Nanjiang? This..." An heir frowned with some hesitation. Yili picked up a pen and wrote a few lines on the paper. "Carefully investigate the Nanzhao royal family and the Saintess of Nanjiang. Don't miss any details." An heir replied, "Yes, this subordinate will immediately send people to do it." "Miss Suspects. The Saintess of Nanjiang." Yili played with the charcoal pen in her hand and smiled. If the Saintess of Nanjiang really doesn't leave the temple, how could she hook up with Li Wang? A few years ago when Li Wang went to Nanjiang, the Saintess of Nanjiang did not appear. Then, an heir's eyes lit up. They have met in private. The alliance with Nanjiang is so important that it is impossible for Li Wang to send someone to discuss it. Also, it is not easy to see the Saintess of Nanjiang. Yili nodded and leaned back in her chair thinking, "Saintess? This identity is really strange." Suddenly, a girl with an unknown identity, origin and ability is pushed to one of the most respected positions in the entire Nanjiang. Are the people of Nanjiang too easily trusting? An heir shook his head and shrugged. If a random person in our Dechu state was named the crown prince, even the emperor's golden mouth and jade words wouldn't be able to convince the public. The Saintess system in Nanjiang seems to be as long as the history of the Nanzhao kingdom. It wasn't that long. Before Nanzhao was established, each tribe governed their own affairs. There was no such thing as a holy maiden. Indeed, after Nanzhao was founded, the state preceptor at that time, who was also the priest of the Nanzhao royal family, chose the first holy maiden. An heir lowered his head and recalled. Yili raised an eyebrow. It sounds like the imperial tutor and the holy maiden have similar roles. So after the holy maiden appeared, Nanzhao no longer had the title of imperial tutor. An heir nodded and pondered for a moment before saying, the imperial tutor's actions aren't as strict as the holy maiden's. The responsibilities that need to be fulfilled are more or less the same. However, in the hearts of the southern border people, the holy maiden is clearly more worthy of worship than the state preceptor. Compared to an old man who likes to wander around, most people prefer a mysterious and beautiful girl. Yili agreed. In the morning, after eating the breakfast brought by the maid, Yili prepared to go out with an heir. But at the door she met Princess Anshi, who was also about to go out. Miss Chu, are you going out? Yili greeted her with an expectant and nervous smile. Sister Princess, is there any news of Brother Qingchen? Princess Anshi shook her head regretfully. Apologies, Miss Chu. There's no news of Master Qingchen yet. Yili lowered her head in disappointment. She said in a low voice, it's okay, Brother Qingchen will be fine. Lin Han and I will also go out to find Brother Qingchen. We'll definitely find him soon. Miss Chu is new to Nanzhao and unfamiliar with the place. Where do you want to find him? Yili helplessly counted with her fingers. She said in a low voice, I'll look around. Maybe I'll find him. Princess Anshi couldn't help but smile. If Miss Chu feels bored, you can walk around the capital. If there's any place you want to go, you can ask the people in the residence to guide you. But there are many dangerous places in Nanjiang. Miss Chu, please don't go alone. Don't let Master Qingchen worry. Yili nodded. I know. Thank you, Sister Princess. You'll find Brother Qingchen soon, right? Or I'll write to Uncle Su. Brother Qingchen said that Uncle Su is the smartest person in the world. He'll definitely find Brother Qingchen. Mr. Hong Yu? Princess Anshi asked softly, startled. Yili nodded heavily. She said with a smile, Sister Princess also knows Uncle Su? Did Brother Qingchen tell you? Princess Anshi nodded slightly. She said with a smile, don't worry, Miss Chu. I promise I'll find Master Qingchen soon. The road to Nanjiang is difficult. Don't let Mr. Hong Yu worry. Otherwise, won't young Master Qingchen feel uneasy when he finds out? Yili blinked. She looked at Princess Anshi in confusion. After a while, she nodded and said, Sister Princess is right. After watching Princess Anshi leave, Yili followed her with a smile. Tell someone to follow Princess Anshi. Yes. In the inn, Han Mingxi walked down from the lobby with a satisfied expression as if she had just woken up. Her languid and elegant demeanor that was different from the people of the southern border immediately attracted the attention of everyone in the inn. Han Mingxi didn't care about other people looking at him. He lazily walked down the stairs and asked the waiter, Have you seen the two masters with me? The waiter felt dizzy. He quickly said, Master, the two masters left early this morning. By the way, there is a letter for Master. The waiter ran to the counter and took the letter from the innkeeper. He handed it to Han Mingxi. Han Mingxi raised her eyebrows. She took the letter and glanced at it. She couldn't help but frown. Jun Wei is really too mean. How can he leave me behind and run away? Humph, there is no one in this world that I can't find. He crumpled the letter into a ball and hesitantly put it in his sleeve. He walked out angrily, leaving the guests in the inn who hadn't come to their senses. At this time, in a restaurant owned by the great Chu people opposite the inn, Yili, dressed in men's clothing, was leisurely sitting by the window drinking tea. The person beside her had changed from an heir to an san. Looking out of the window, he happened to see Han Mingxi, who was grumbling resentfully, walking out from inside. Yili was amused as she watched Han Mingxi walk into the crowd and gradually disappear. She asked, What did Han Mingxi do yesterday? And San said in a deep voice, Master Han went out in the middle of the night 2 days ago. He didn't come back until 10 past midnight. He should have gone to the Tianyi Pavilion's stronghold in Nanzhao. We and the Tianyi Pavilion have never offended each other. Master, do you need to investigate? Yili shook her head and said, No need. It's fine as long as he doesn't hinder us. Pay attention to the news from Anxi. Don't let Han Mingyue come to find us without us knowing. And San nodded. Strictly speaking, Master didn't scheme against the Tianyi Pavilion. It was Master Han who followed us to Nanjiang. The Tianyi Pavilion's master shouldn't make trouble for us. That's not necessarily true. Does the Tianyi Pavilion send news regularly? Yili asked. Chapter 191. Yes, I've compared the information I got from the Tianyi Pavilion with our own information. There's not much difference, and San replied. Yili nodded in satisfaction. That's good. If there's someone who can deceive the Shadow Guard and the Tianyi Pavilion at the same time, then it wouldn't be an injustice for us to be fooled. When we return, ask the Tianyi Pavilion for information on the Saintess of Nanjiang. I told Han Mingxi that I want the hidden luo flower. If we ask for information on the Saintess of Nanjiang now, Han Mingxi won't be suspicious. Yes. Young Master, there's news on Sickly Scholar's side. I'm afraid Master Liang won't be able to hold on any longer. Are you? Yili frowned in annoyance. She didn't expect to receive news of her brother's disappearance as soon as she arrived in Nanzhao. As a result, not only could she not get any advice or help from Su Qingchen, she also had to find Su Qingchen's whereabouts in the shortest amount of time possible. This made her a little busy, but she couldn't ignore Sickly Scholar. Master Liang isn't a martial artist after all. Besides, with Sickly Scholar's methods, I'm afraid even a martial artist won't be able to hold on for long. Before, Sickly Scholar was afraid that he wouldn't have any clues if he killed Master Liang. Now that the token was in his hands, even if Master Liang didn't say anything, he could always find some clues if he put in some effort. And without the token, Master Liang wouldn't be able to explain himself. Where are they? Outside the city. Yili thought for a moment and said, It's more important to find my brother first. Let the Shadow Guard keep an eye on them. If there's no other choice, help the people of the Lui tribe rescue Master Liang first. We can't let him tell Sickly Scholar the way to obtain the hidden luo flower. At least not before we have the time. If we can't, we can only snatch it. If we can't, we'll destroy the hidden luo flower. We can't let Sickly Scholar get it. And San said hesitantly, the hidden luo flower might be able to cure the prince's illness. If it's destroyed, that's why we have to try our best to get it. But if we really can't get it, we can't let Sickly Scholar get it. Who do you think the first person he'll deal with? Yili asked with a smile. Prince, what's the reason for this? He's going to Nanjiang alone, and didn't use the power of the Yanwang chamber. Why did he go to Nanjiang alone this time? He went alone to Nanjiang. And didn't use Yanwang chambers. Why he went to? Is it for him to send him alone? Did he go alone to go? The other two heads of the King of Hell's pavilion must have disagreed. Back then, Sickly Scholar had almost lost his life due to his serious injuries. Even now he was barely hanging on. How could he not hate him? However, Yama's pavilion and Ding King's palace made an agreement to never offend each other. So he can only rely on himself. Thinking of Sickly Scholar's resentful eyes when he mentioned the hidden Luo underworld, Yili couldn't help but shudder. Because of this, the thought of killing Sickly Scholar first popped up in his mind. However, this thought only flashed through his mind. Whether it was because of Sickly Scholar's identity or other reasons, she couldn't kill him now. At least he couldn't die in the hands of Princess Consort Ding. This subordinate understands. I will never let Sickly Scholar get the hidden luo flower. Somewhere in Nanzhao, in a secret palace, there were marble floors and pillars carved with exquisite patterns, exquisite gold ornaments and utensils inlaid with gems of various colors, and countless luminous pearls replacing the light formed by candles. Nanjiang's most precious hibiscus muslin was wrapped in layers. Behind the muslin, an elegant man in white was sitting quietly reading a book. Under the soft light of the luminous pearls, the man's perfect side face was suffused with a faint luster, and his whole person seemed more quiet and peaceful. The heavy stone door was pushed open from the outside, and a slender and graceful woman slowly walked in. Different from the traditional Nanjiang costume, the woman wore a bright yellow wide robe with phoenix patterns, and the hem of the robe dragged on the ground. Her black hair was casually tied up, decorated with gorgeous multicolored gems, and a delicate golden mask covered her entire face. The delicate mask had a strange charm, making the eyes under the mask even more dazzling. The woman walked gracefully, looked at the man in white and whispered with a smile, "Young Master Qingchen, you really don't want to look at me? As long as you nod, I will take off my mask and let you see." Su Qingchen put down the book in his hand, sighed softly, looked up and asked, Are you more beautiful than those on the Chu capital beauty map? This seemed to be the first time Su Qingchen responded to this question. The woman was a little surprised. You like the women of Dechu state? I have also heard of the Chu capital beauty map. Which one do you like more? Is it the number one beauty of Dechu State, Suzuki? He seems to have died. Su Qingchen smiled faintly. Suzuki is indeed a good beauty. If you are not as beautiful as her, then don't look at her. You. A trace of anger flashed in the woman's eyes, but she quickly calmed down and said with a smile, young Master Qingchen is too picky. As far as I know, your little fiancé is indeed good-looking, but she doesn't seem to have reached the level of absolute beauty. Su Qingchen lowered his eyes, hiding the strange look in his eyes. The woman took Su Qingchen's silence and said with a snort, speaking of which, that Miss Chu is indeed deeply in love with young master. She actually came all the way to Nanjiang with only one guard. Miss Chu really doesn't seem like a woman of the Central Plains. Where is she? Su Qingchen asked. Yesterday she came to our Crown Princess Anshi's residence with great fanfare. Since Princess Anshi and young master are good friends, I'm sure she will take good care of young master's fiancé. The woman covered her mouth with a smile. Young Master Qingchen, are you really not going to consider my proposal? After this is done, you and I can share the world. Su Qingchen's expression was calm and he said softly, if this one guesses correctly, 3 years ago, Miss also made a promise to share the world with Dechu State's Prince Li. The woman flicked her sleeve disdainfully and said with a smile, Mo Jingli? How can he compare to young master? I believe that in this world besides Prince Ding, there is no one who can compare to young master. Prince Ding is already crippled. Young master is the most perfect man in this world and the most compatible man with me. Su Qingchen shook his head. I am truly sorry. The Su family has a rule of marriage. The descendants of the Su family are not allowed to covet beauty, wealth, or power. This one can only marry one person in this life. Miss, it is useless to keep me locked up like this. Nanzhao's capital is not big. It is only a matter of time before someone finds this place. The woman half leaned on a marble pillar and giggled. Aren't you afraid that I will kill you? In this half year, how many bad ideas have you come up with for Anshi? How many things have you ruined for me? Don't you like women from the Central Plains? Am I not more like a woman from the Central Plains than Anshi? Su Qingchen shook his head and lowered his head to continue reading, saying, if you wanted to kill me, you would have done so long ago. Also, what good would it do you to kill me? That's right. The woman sighed helplessly, killing you is really troublesome. The Su family of the Central Plains and maybe even the Ding Crown Prince's residence will make trouble for me. Also, our Crown Princess will definitely fight me to the death. But, although I can't kill you, I can lock you up here. That way you can't ruin my business. Without you, it won't be long before Anshi, that arrogant and annoying woman, dies a horrible death. Of course, there is also your cute fiancé. Chapter 192. You're not allowed to touch her. Su Qingchen seemed to be enraged and warned her coldly. You really care about her? The woman looked at Su Qingchen strangely. Why would you like a little girl who hasn't grown up yet? Su Qingchen said indifferently, as long as she's my fiancé, I'll naturally care. The woman stared at her. You mean no matter what kind of person she is, as long as she's your fiancé, you'll care about her? Su Qingchen smiled. Isn't that natural? Since she's my future wife, if I don't care about her, who else would I care about? Fine, I'll show you what I'm capable of. The woman sneered and glared hatefully at Su Qingchen before leaving in a huff. Hearing the heavy stone door close again, Su Qingchen slowly put down the book in her hand. Her handsome eyes drooped. Fiancé. Late at night, Princess Anshi's residence was quiet. Only the light in the study was still faintly lit. Princess Anshi's handsome face showed a trace of tiredness as she frowned at the man in front of her. Is there still no news from Qingchen? The man shook his head and said in a low voice, no. Princess Anshi said anxiously, what's the matter? Does she still not believe that we really think Qingchen is missing? The man nodded, it's very likely. Although we've sent people to look for young Master Qingchen, it's very likely that she still thinks we're working together with young Master Qingchen to put on a show for her. I hope nothing bad happened to Qingchen. Princess Anshi closed her eyes tiredly and rubbed her aching forehead. We've spent so much effort and finally made the situation better. If we fail now, I'm afraid. Father. The man frowned. His Majesty still doesn't believe the princess? Princess Anshi smiled bitterly. Father is just over 40 years old and is in the prime of his life. Even if he believes us, he won't support us. He needs another force to suppress me, the crown princess. If it wasn't for father's secret favoritism, they wouldn't have failed again and again in the past 6 months. Every time they were about to catch that person's tail, she would escape. Now even the commander's seal is in her hands. If we can't get the commander's seal back, nothing we do will be of any use. Princess Anshi didn't understand why her wise father would side with that woman. But he couldn't just stand by and watch as she tried to do something bad to Nanzhao. This was her responsibility as the princess of Nanzhao and the crown princess. Can you find out where young Master Qingchen is? Princess Anshi asked. If you can't find out, then ask Qingchen to withdraw first. This is Nanzhao's own matter. We cannot implicate him. The man shook his head and said, I'm afraid not. Although we receive news from young Master Qingchen from time to time, it is young Master Qingchen who gets in touch with us. We have no idea where young Master Qingchen is. Damn it! Princess Anshi cursed. Assassin! A shout came from outside the courtyard. Princess Anshi stood up abruptly. The man beside her pulled out his sword and opened the door. But soon he came back and said with a frown, They are going to the guest courtyard. Princess Anshi said, There is only Miss Chu in the guest courtyard. Why would the assassin want to find her? Let's go and have a look. Then she rushed out of the door and went to the guest courtyard. The man quickly closed the door and followed her out. The study was quiet again. The window in the corner moved slightly. Then it was pushed open. A black figure quickly flipped in. A pair of clear and beautiful eyes were revealed under the black mask. The black-clothed person quickly walked to the desk and flipped through the files on the table. After looking through them once, she didn't seem to have found anything. She then went to the bookshelf behind her to look for something. There weren't many books in Princess Anshi's study. Most of them were official documents and most of them were written in Nanjiang. After a long time, a file hidden in the most inconspicuous corner of the bookshelf fell into the eyes of the person in black. What caught her attention was not the file itself but the seal on it. It was a sunflower-shaped seal. The eyes of the black-clothed man flashed and a thin blade appeared at his fingertips. He quickly tore open the sealed file. She glanced through it quickly. A faint smile appeared in her beautiful eyes. After resealing the file, she restored the study to its original state. Then she flipped out of the window. In the guest courtyard, Princess Anshi was stopped at the door by an heir when she arrived with her guards. An heir looked at the people in front of him with a sullen face and said, Princess, it's so late. What's the matter? Princess Anshi said, Assassins just broke into the guest courtyard. Is Miss Chu all right? Assassins? An heir frowned and said, I've been keeping watch outside. No assassins came in. Princess Anshi was surprised. Her guards would never lie. Besides, she did see several black figures enter the guest courtyard from a distance. Why did Miss Chu's guards deny it? Guard Lin, Miss Chu is young Master Qingchen's fiancée. If she is hurt, I can't explain it to young Master Qingchen. Is it true that no one broke into the guest courtyard? An heir's face was unhappy. He said in a low voice, when there was a quarrel outside, there were several black figures approaching. But they were scared away by my hidden weapons. Some of them should have been injured. But they definitely didn't enter the guest courtyard. Miss Chu's reputation is important. Princess, please be careful with your words. Looking at an heir's gloomy and serious expression, Princess Anshi finally understood why this guard insisted that the assassins didn't come in. The women of the Central Plains were much stricter about their reputation than those in the south. My apologies, Guard Lin. It was this princess's slip of the tongue. She waved her hand to let the guards behind her leave to continue searching for the assassins. Then she turned to an heir and said, Did the commotion just now scare Miss Chu? Why didn't she come out? An heir said indifferently, Miss Chu lives in the inner courtyard. Perhaps she didn't hear the commotion outside. Princess Anshi frowned and said, Since it's inconvenient for Guard Lin, this princess will go see Miss Chu in person. It's not good if she's scared. No, princess sister, what's the matter? An heir was about to refuse when Yi Li's voice came from behind. Yi Li was wearing a large cloak. Her beautiful hair was draped over her shoulders. There was a faint sleepiness and confusion in her eyes. The one holding the lamp beside her was really a maid sent by Princess Anshi to serve her. Princess Anshi smiled and said, It's nothing. Just a few thieves broke in. Did they disturb Miss Chu? Yili tilted her head and smiled peacefully. Don't worry. Lin Han's martial arts are very good. He's been protecting me all this time. Lin Han, right? An heir lowered his head and said respectfully, that's right. Don't worry, Mississippi. The assassins didn't come in just now. I've already beaten them away. Princess Anchi looked at Yili and saw that there was nothing wrong with her. Then she nodded and said, in that case Miss Chu should have a good rest. I'll send people to look elsewhere in case any fish escapes the net. Yes, thank you for your hard work, Princess Sister. Yili smiled obediently. Watching Princess Anchi leave, the smile on Yili's face gradually disappeared. She turned to the maid beside her and said, let's go back. The maid nodded and followed Yili to the inner courtyard. As soon as they entered the room they felt their backs go numb and they fell to the ground. An heir quietly appeared at the door. Yili raised her eyebrows and looked at him asking, what's the matter with the assassins? An heir said in a low voice, there were indeed assassins. They should have come from Mississippi. An heir walked into the room and pulled out a black-clothed figure from under the bed. A total of 3 people came. They underestimated the enemy too much and were discovered by the princess's guards. After being injured by my hidden weapon they immediately left. This one was the most seriously injured and was caught by me. Chapter 193. Yili squatted down and looked at the person on the ground. He looked like a typical person from Nanjiang. Even though he was wearing black night clothes he didn't hide his features. They shouldn't be Princess Anchi's men. Chu Luyun shouldn't have any enemies in Nanjiang. Who dares to chase after the princess and provoke her? An heir frowned and said, could it be that someone else knows about our identities? Yili shook her head. That's not right. If someone really knows about our identities, I'm afraid it won't be as simple as these few low-level assassins. What happened tonight is more like a demonstration or a provocation to Princess Anchi. A demonstration? A provocation to Princess Anchi? Is it because of young Master Qingshan? Nair guessed. Yili nodded and said thoughtfully, I think so too. In Nanjiang the only person related to Chu Liyun's identity is Big Brother. But what's the use of such a provocation if it doesn't hurt? In comparison it's more useful to capture me to threaten Big Brother. If Big Brother is in the other party's hands. With these assassins' abilities, they can't take anyone away from the princess residence even if I'm not here. They haven't even touched the guest house, but they have already alerted the princess residence's guards. Such assassins can't even kill people, let alone kidnap someone alive. Miss, can you guess who did it? Yili smiled lightly and said, I didn't know at first but I'm quite confident now. Tomorrow I'll try out your interrogation skills and verify my theory. An heir knew many interrogation experts such as the romantic and elegant Feng San Gongzi Feng Zhiyao, the leader of the hidden guards who was responsible for training them, and the Dingguo Wang Fu's steward Uncle Amo, who was solemn and silent but actually had a good heart. However, an heir never knew that the originally delicate princess consort Ding's master was also an expert in this area. Many times, the 4 of them couldn't help but secretly guess how badly the Yi family treated the princess consort back then to distort a rich young lady from a prestigious family like this. It would take a lot of effort to bring that unlucky assassin out of the princess residence. At this moment the princess residence was under martial law, and the price of bringing him out might not be proportional to the rewards they would receive. So an heir didn't plan on waiting until tomorrow. He prepared to pry open that unlucky guard's mouth on the spot. The guest courtyard wasn't small, and Yi Li's room was located in the innermost part of the courtyard, so as long as they didn't shout, even the people outside the courtyard wouldn't notice anything. Of course, the shadow guard who had been hiding in the princess residence would not allow anyone who was not supposed to get close to the guest courtyard. After the unlucky assassin was forced to drink a cup of herbal tea mixed with tendon softening powder, he couldn't scream even if he wanted to. Thus, a few strange scenes appeared in the elegantly decorated room. On one side of the couch lay a maid from Nanjiang who had fallen into a deep sleep. Sitting at the table was a charming young girl who was writing and drawing under the lamp. A few steps away, however, there was an inhumane interrogation going on under torture. An heir's face darkened as he broke the assassin's left leg bone. That assassin's face was deathly pale and he was drenched in sweat, but he still clenched his teeth and refused to speak. Because of the restrictions of this place, he couldn't use too troublesome and bloody methods. This made an heir's face become more and more ugly, Even after Yili finished dealing with her own matters and raised her head, an heir still couldn't get the assassin to spit out a single useful sentence. Instead, that assassin almost bit his tongue and committed suicide. Is it no good? Do you need help? Yili stood up and asked. An heir's mouth twitched. He shook his head and said, "There's no need to trouble young miss with this kind of thing. No problem. Even if you break another leg, he still won't confess. Then I'll break all the bones in his body." An heir coldly stared at the assassin. Yili shook her head and said with a smile, "When you break half of his bones, he'll be dead." What idea does young miss have? Yili leisurely walked over. She squatted down and smiled at the assassin on the ground. She softly said, "Do you understand Central Plains language? Don't worry, I won't be as rough as him." The assassin vigilantly stared at the charming young girl with a kind smile. As an assassin, his intuition told him that this pretty and cute young girl in front of him was the truly dangerous person. "Don't be afraid, I won't break your bones like he did. I plan to remove all the bones in your body," Yili said with a smile as she looked at the assassin who was staring at her with vigilance. "Don't be afraid, I won't break your bones like he did. Let's start from your fingers." Her slender white hand held the assassin's left hand. With a gotcha sound, a knuckle on the left index finger strangely twisted. Yili continued to move downwards. Another crisp sound was heard and her entire index finger was twisted. The assassin's jaw was dislocated and he couldn't even cry out. He could only make vague ah sounds. Yili looked at him. "Nod your head whenever you want to, but don't wait until I remove all the bones in your body before you nod. By then it'll be too late." Gotcha. Yili's expression was calm, but her hands were moving in an orderly manner. And it was this kind of calmness that was more frightening than an heir's threatening words. When Yili's hand moved to the assassin's right hand, the assassin who was breathing weakly finally nodded his head with difficulty. Yili raised an eyebrow and looked at an heir from the corner of her eyes. "I thought it was some tough bone, but it's just like this?" An heir silently wiped the sweat from his forehead. He also felt that this assassin was a bit too useless. But at the same time he felt that his master wasn't scary because of her methods of torturing people, but rather that terrifying calmness. If it was him, he would also be scared. "Very good, but you can't joke with me. Otherwise, the consequences will only make you regret living in this world." Yili sincerely looked at him and advised. Yili nodded in satisfaction. "Very good. Then tell me who your master is." Waving her hand to indicate for an heir to close his jaw, Yili asked. A trace of fear flashed through the assassin's eyes. He looked at Yili and opened his mouth but didn't say anything. Yili wrinkled her brows and thought for a bit before saying, "If you're worried about your life's safety, I can guarantee your safety. Moreover, after I finish the matters in Nanjiang, I can give you a sum of money to let you change your surname and start a new life." The assassin's eyes flashed and there was a bit of hesitation on his face. Yili saw this and the smile on her face became even more sincere. "Your information is very important to me, so as long as you give me true information, I promise to fulfill the promise. However, I think you should also understand that you're not the only one who knows the information. If you don't say it, others might say it. At that time, I'm very sorry, I can only..." Seeing the assassin's nervous expression, Yili said with a smile, "No, I won't kill you. When I came to Nanjiang, I passed by a valley that was filled with blood-red flowers. There was also a small snake under each of the flowers. At the time I was thinking, with so many snakes, what would they eat to grow? What do you think?" "Snake. Snake Valley. No. It wasn't only the people of the Central Plains who were afraid of a place like Snake Valley. The people of Nanjiang weren't afraid of snakes, but other than the snake tamers, there was no one who wasn't afraid of thousands of uncontrolled poisonous snakes." Chapter 194. Then, your answer? I say, what do you want to ask? Yili turned to look at an heir and raised an eyebrow in satisfaction. In reality, she didn't get much information from the assassin. After all, it wasn't likely that the person sent out as cannon fodder was a core figure. However, at least it confirmed part of Yili's guess. At the same time, they locked onto the target of Su Qingchen's disappearance. However, Su Qingchen's exact location was still unknown. Since it was confirmed that Su Qingchen's life wasn't in danger for the time being, Yili's worried heart finally relaxed. Junwei. Junwei. There was a burst of cheerful shouts on the noisy street. The passers-by all looked over and saw a handsome man wearing white clothes of the Central Plains waving happily at a youth not far away. Yili turned back and saw the man in white running towards her. She sighed helplessly and raised a smile. "Brother Han, I haven't seen you for a few days. How have you been?" Han Mingxi looked at Yili with bewitching eyes and hidden bitterness. "Junwei, I came thousands of li to Nanzhao with you and you actually abandoned me. You are so cruel." Yili unconsciously shivered. Although the passers-by didn't understand what he was saying, seeing his appearance and hearing his tone, they unconsciously looked at them strangely. "Brother Han." Yili couldn't help but rub her forehead. She did her best to control her temper before smiling. "Brother Han has finally slept enough? How rare." Han Mingxi didn't feel guilty at all. He moved closer and smiled. "No, I woke up a long time ago and strolled around the city. However, I didn't see Junwei. Junwei, why didn't you tell me about this? Wouldn't it be safer for me to go with you?" Yili rolled her eyes at him. "I'm just looking around. I'm not going into a dragon's den or a tiger's den." Han Mingxi shrugged and said indifferently, "Even if Junwei wants to go to a dragon's den or a tiger's den, I will go with you." He didn't forget to wink at Yili. His eyes were saying, "Look at how good I am to you." Yili frowned. She did not expect to run into Han Mingxi. However, it was obviously very inconvenient to bring Han Mingxi along now. If he didn't bring him along, given Han Mingxi's personality, he really didn't know what kind of mess he would make the Tianyi Pavilion make in the capital of Nanzhao. Yili lowered her head and thought for a moment. Then she said, "Brother Han, let's talk somewhere else." After finding a room in a tea house and sitting down, Yili said, "Brother Han, I have some matters to attend to. It might not be convenient for you to follow me." Han Mingxi rested his head on the table and glared at Yili as he complained, Why didn't you say it was inconvenient when you asked for information about the Tianyi Pavilion? Now you want to dump me? You're abandoning me after seducing me." Yili was speechless. She had paid a corresponding price for the information about the Tianyi Pavilion. She didn't ask him to work for free. Seeing that Yili didn't want to talk to him, Han Mingxi bit his nails and said with a smile, "What can happen in such a small place like Nanzhao? Didn't Junwei come to find the Netherworld flower? I have the information about the Saintess of Nanjiang. Otherwise it would be Sickly Scholar. I also know the whereabouts of Sickly Scholar, but he seems to be targeted by another group of people. Junwei, it's better not to provoke them. Otherwise, young Master Qingchen is missing, right?" Han Mingxi tilted his head and smiled innocently. The Tianyi Pavilion's information is indeed worthy of its reputation. Yili sighed softly. Han Mingxi said with a smile, "Does the Tianyi Pavilion sell information? There are only a few major events in the capital of Nanzhao recently. What are we doing? So, Junwei, which one do you want to deal with first?" Yili stared at him. After a long while, she said softly with a smile, "Do you know where young Master Qingchen is?" Han Mingxi's eyes flashed and he said with some dissatisfaction, "You want to find him first? Junwei, I thought the Biluo flower and the Netherworld flower were more important to you." Yili said, "You can take them at any time. If you don't find them, they may not be intact." Han Mingxi looked at her with his chin propped up. "You want to know about young Master Qingchen? Tell me, what's your relationship with him?" Yili shook her head and said with a smile, "You don't know about Su Qingchen. Otherwise, you wouldn't be negotiating with me now, right?" Han Mingxi snorted and stared at her with a gloomy face. "Then do you want the information about the Saintess of Nanjiang? If you don't, I'll burn it." "He's my elder brother," Yili replied. Han Mingxi frowned. He looked at her up and down for a long time and asked, "Brother? Are you Su Qingbai or Su Qingyan? In terms of age, you are more like Su Qingyan, but in terms of character you are like Su Qingbai. But no one said that the young masters of the Su family know martial arts." Yili said with a smile, "It seems that the information of the Tianyi Pavilion is not so reliable. The third young master of the Su family, Su Qingfeng, is now serving in the army. Brother Han, don't you know?" Han Mingxi stared at her suspiciously. "Are you really a member of the Su family?" Yili smiled but didn't say anything. She neither admitted nor denied it. Han Mingxi walked back and forth in the room with some irritation. From time to time he muttered to Yili to vent his dissatisfaction, "You lied to me. You are not looking for the Netherworld flower. You are looking for Su Qingchen. Junwei, you lied to me." Young master. An heir's voice came from outside the door. The door was pushed open from the outside. An heir glanced at Han Mingxi and said to Yili, Young master, there is news. Yili nodded, come in and talk. Inside the room, Yili and an heir both looked at Han Mingxi. However, the usually tactful young master Feng Yu was unexpectedly oblivious. It seemed that he didn't understand the other party's desire for him to leave. He sat in the chair and began to eat the snacks. Yili waved her hand helplessly at an heir and said, forget it. Just say it. An heir nodded and said in a low voice, Princess Anxi came into contact with young Master Qingchen today, or someone related to young Master Qingchen. Yili frowned, what do you mean? An heir said, when Princess Anxi returned home today, her body was stained with some special incense. The people of Nanjiang don't like incense, so they don't have any special research on incense. But they don't know that in the Central Plains, even the same incense has many different things to pay attention to. For example, among the young masters of the Su family, other than the third and fifth young masters who don't use incense, the second young master is used to using plum incense. The fourth young master prefers orchid incense. As for young Master Qingchen, because he goes out all year round, the incense is personally made by Madame Su. She adds some medicine that is beneficial to the body, so he has a very light medicine box. It's definitely not easy for ordinary people to distinguish, and it's even more difficult to imitate and make it. Yili frowned. Where did Princess Anxi go? The palace. This morning the king of Nanzhao summoned Princess Anxi. After leaving the palace, Princess Anxi went straight back home. An heir said with certainty. Han Mingxi smiled curiously, young Master Qingchen can't be in the palace, right? An heir hesitated and said with a frown, the chance of Princess Anxi seeing young Master Qingchen with her own eyes is not high. From the time Princess Anxi entered and left the palace, other than when she had an audience with the king of Nanzhao, she was basically in our line of sight. It's impossible for her to see young Master Qingchen, except when she had an audience with the king of Nanzhao. And, after returning home, Princess Anxi sent more people to secretly look for young Master Qingchen. Yili shook her head and said, the king of Nanzhao should know elder brother's identity. If something happens to elder brother in Nanzhao now, it won't do him any good. So, elder brother's chance in the palace is not high. That incense should be a message from him to tell us that he is safe now. Chapter 195. And San didn't understand, since young Master Qingchen is not in the imperial palace, why would the message come from the imperial palace? Why would the perfume that young Master Qingchen carries with him be in the imperial palace? Naturally, it is because the other party may be someone from the imperial palace. Even if they are not, they are people who can freely enter and leave the imperial palace. Han Mingxi lazily shook his head, that's not right. In Nanzhao, other than the crown princess, no one can freely enter and leave the imperial palace. This includes the other princesses. Of course, even this princess is not in Nanzhao right now. Yili glanced at him. It is not difficult in the open, but not in the dark? In the dark. The two asked in unison. Yili frowned and asked, have you found the traces of those assassins? And San nodded, we found them, but we were a step too late. They were killed on a small mound 2 li outside the city. Their bodies were left in an abandoned cave. Speak carefully. When we were looking for their bodies, we found them in a secluded cave 10 miles west of the city. But there were no signs of fighting at the scene. Although that place was not far from the capital, the road was very difficult to walk on and there was nothing around. Even if those assassins were running for their lives, they should not have forgotten that direction. But fortunately, the hidden weapon that injured them had a tracking medicinal scent. It took an entire night to find them. They should have been killed not long after they left the city. Then the bodies were thrown into that cave. Yili rubbed her brows and asked thoughtfully, in which direction were they killed? In other words, they originally wanted to go east, but after they were killed, the mastermind threw the bodies to the west? What is there in the east? Yili stood. Give me the map of Nanzhao's capital. And San lowered her head and took out a thin piece of paper from her chest and carefully spread it on the table. Han Mingxi looked over and pursed his lips. The entire map of Nanzhao's capital? Junwei, you didn't need to go to the Tianyi Pavilion to gather information, did you? Yili smiled and said, The more information we have, the safer we will be. I have always cherished my life. Besides, I don't believe that the Tianyi Pavilion can't come up with this map. This was not a defensive map, but an ordinary map of the layout of a city. He took out a charcoal pencil and circled the imperial palace on the map. He went to Princess Anshi's mansion, the place where Su Qingqian went missing, the place where her body was dumped, and the place where she was killed. He looked up and asked, "How do you feel?" Han Mingxi pointed at the drawing and said, "If you don't look at the location of the corpse and the princess's residence, these locations seem to be very close to the Saint Lady Temple. Speaking of which, if I hadn't seen this picture, I wouldn't have known that the Saint Lady Temple was so close to the palace." The Saint Lady Temple was located on a mountain 5 miles east of the capital. But if you count the distance from the palace and the journey up the mountain, it would take at least 10 miles to get to the Saint Lady Temple. Yili pointed and lowered her head. Ordinary people only think that the road from the Imperial Palace to the Saint Lady Temple is not close. Moreover, the Imperial Palace is built on a mountain. The mountain behind the Imperial Palace is steep and dangerous. It is difficult to get to the Saint Lady Temple from the mountain, and it will take more time than leaving the city directly. So basically, no one has paid attention to it. In fact, the distance between the Imperial Palace and the Saint Lady Temple is less than 2 miles. Tunnel? Insan asked. Haven't we seen the ability of the people of Nanjiang to dig tunnels on our way here? Yili asked with a smile. The two of them thought of the almost hollowed-out mountain at the same time and fell silent. What did the king of Nanzhao who founded the country think? Why did he still build the Imperial Palace? Han Mingxi asked in confusion. In the history of the Central Plains, only temporary palaces or side palaces would be built on mountains. The real imperial palaces were all located in the center of the capital city. It not only showed the nobility of the royal family, but also showed the majesty of the people. Yili replied without much seriousness, "The customs are different." Han Mingxi could tell at a glance that she was just being perfunctory. He glared at Yili unhappily for a long time and found that the other party was still immersed in her own thoughts. Han Mingxi's face suddenly darkened. After coughing twice to attract the attention of the two people in the side room, Han Mingxi smiled and said, "You suspect that young Master Qingqian is in the Saint Lady Temple? As everyone knows, the Saint Lady of Nanjiang is as pure as ice and as pure as jade. The Saint Lady Temple does not allow men to enter, let alone harbor men. If people know that you think so, believe me, you will be drowned by the anger of the people of Nanzhao." Yili said indifferently, "Is it because everyone knows that it is more likely?" Han Mingxi rolled his eyes. "Then how can young Master Junwei enter the Saint Lady Temple, which is as guarded as the Imperial Palace, and find young Master Qingqian who is hidden somewhere? If we can't find him and you are found, we will really be killed by the people of Nanzhao." "I don't plan to enter through the Saint Lady Temple," Yili said. Han Mingxi's face was full of shock and admiration. "So young Master Junwei plans to brave the Nanzhao Imperial Palace? Brother Junwei, even if the Nanzhao Imperial Palace is not even a third of the size of our Chu capital, can you not look down on them? Don't forget, there are no poisonous snakes in our Chu capital's Imperial Palace, but Nanzhao might not." Yili smiled faintly. "You speak as if young Master Feng Yu has never been to the Imperial Palace. Who was it that bragged a few days ago that someone had visited the Imperial Palaces of various countries?" Han Mingxi was speechless. For some reason, she began to silently regret bragging about her past romantic history to Junwei when she was bored during the journey. "Even if you go in and find young Master Qingqian, how will you bring him out?" Han Mingxi asked. "As far as I know, young Master Qingqian does not know martial arts at all." Yili frowned and said, "This I have to think about it carefully. They definitely couldn't force their way in. Even if the Shadow Guard was strong enough to snatch someone from the Nanzhao Imperial Palace, it would be troublesome to deal with the aftermath. If outsiders knew that the people who made the move were from the Ding Imperial Palace, it would be even more troublesome." Seeing her frown in deep thought, Han Mingxi smiled cheerfully and said, "How is it? Do you need help?" Yili looked at Han Mingxi and shook her head. She and Han Mingxi were only partners. Last time Han Mingxi had taken many risks with her. This time, no matter what, she couldn't drag him into the danger. Han Mingxi looked at her with a smile and said, "Don't be so quick to refuse. In any case, the Tianyi Pavilion is a business. As long as Junwei can afford it, we can do more than just collect information." Yili's heart was moved. She looked at Han Mingxi and asked, "What does Brother Han want?" Han Mingxi smiled proudly and said, "Aromatic Elegance Pavilion, I want 20% more." Yili said, "I thought the Tianyi Pavilion liked real money? You should know that no matter how much it is, whether it's the Su family or me, we will give it to you." Han Mingxi looked at her with grievance and said, "Jun Wei and I are friends. How can friends take advantage of others' difficulties?" "Friends?" Yili faintly raised her eyebrows and said, "The Tianyi Pavilion is not good at these things. I don't want to trouble Brother Han." "Junwei, you are too polite." Han Mingxi smiled and said, "Although the Tianyi Pavilion is not good at these things, we are very familiar with the Nanzhao Imperial City. Compared to our friendship, don't you think the Tianyi Pavilion is more trustworthy?" Yili frowned and pondered for a while before saying, "Then I'll have to trouble Brother Han. After this, I will be responsible for the Tianyi Pavilion's losses. Of course, the Fragrant Elegance Pavilion's 20% share will remain the same." Chapter 196. Like I said, Junwei is treating me like an outsider. Han Mingxi sighed helplessly. Yili smiled faintly and lowered her head without saying a word. She wondered if she needed Princess Anshi's help. In the sparkling light of the pearls, the heavy stone door was opened. The woman in the golden dress was no longer as leisurely as she used to be. Her messy footsteps seemed to contain great anger. Su Qingchen, who was resting with his eyes closed, opened his eyes and looked back at the woman who came in a hurry. He frowned and said, "What's wrong?" The woman seemed to be furious. She swept all the celadone teacups on the table to the ground with a wave of her sleeve. The sound of the teacups breaking was crisp and pleasant. "Speak. How did they know you were here?" Su Qingchen shook his head and said faintly, "I can't even get out of the door. How could I know this? What's wrong? Did someone make trouble for you? How could you not know? You must have spread the news. Tell me, what did you do?" The woman tried to control her anger and asked. Su Qingchen shook his head and sighed. "You think too highly of me. I'm just a weak and helpless scholar, not a hidden expert. If you have time to think about this, why don't you think about who you have offended recently?" The woman snorted and said, "How could I offend anyone? Besides Anshi, the only person I have offended in my life. Ah, it seems to be your delicate fiancé. I told you not to touch her," Su Qingchen said in a low voice. The woman sneered, "Don't worry. Your precious fiancé is fine. But it doesn't mean she will be fine in the future. Last time I just wanted to scare her. Speaking of which, it seems that her bodyguards are good." Su Qingchen didn't care. "Are you talking about her bodyguards? The daughters of the Central Plains always have a few bodyguards when they go out. It's not a big deal. You trust her. Why don't we continue to see if her bodyguards can protect her? Who knows, maybe they'll fall in love with each other. Don't girls love to play the hero and save the beauty?" Su Qingchen glanced at her. "If you have the time, why don't you tell me what happened to make you so angry?" At the mention of this matter, the woman's face, hidden under the mask, could not help but twist. She said with hatred, "Someone threw the bodies of those assassins outside the Saint Lady Temple." Su Qingchen was a little surprised, but she soon relaxed her brows. "Even so, it's not a big deal. Just leave it to the Nanzhao royal family or the authorities to deal with it." "How can this be?" The woman cried out, "Don't tell me you don't know. If someone knows that a body has been dumped in the Temple of the Saint Lady, Anshi will definitely take the opportunity to search the Temple of the Saint Lady. Humph. Don't think that I don't know that she has long wanted to reach into the Saint Lady's hall. But she's not qualified." Su Qingchen reached for a book and opened it. She said, "You haven't told me yet. If people know that the corpse was found in the Saint Lady's temple, the people of Nanzhao will doubt the sanctity of the Saint Lady of Nanjiang. Most importantly, if you had another year or two, you could have pushed this matter to the Dechu state or West Hill. But now, you're not even ready to go to war with the Dechu state." The woman's eyes darkened. She stared at him gloomily and said in a low voice, "You know too much. Aren't you afraid that I'll kill you?" Su Qingchen nodded slightly. "Because you want to know more from me, don't you?" "That's right," the woman admitted directly. "If you hadn't secretly helped Anshi, she wouldn't have been able to defeat me. Since you can help her, you can help me, can't you?" Su Qingchen shook his head. "I won't help you. I'll make sure you're willing." The woman sneered. Su Qingchen put down the book again and looked at her with pity. You're not suitable for this at all. None of the previous saints of Nanjiang are suitable. Even if you're smarter than them, you're still not as good as Princess Anxi when it comes to governing a country. A trace of anger flashed in the woman's eyes. She said coldly, Who says I'm not suitable? You admit that I'm smarter than Anxi, don't you? You're just better at scheming than her. But a country can't be governed by scheming. What's more, you can't even do scheming. So what? At least you're in my hands now, aren't you? The woman said proudly. Su Qingchen smiled and said nothing. Looking at Su Qingchen's calm face, the woman suddenly felt very angry. She said with hatred, You're looking down on me. Su Qingchen frowned. I'm not looking down on you. I just don't agree with what you're doing now. I know. You're looking down on me. The woman screamed. What do you know? Do you know what kind of life Anxi has lived since she was a child? What kind of life I've lived since I was a child? Why is she born as the crown princess and the crown princess? Why does everything belong to her? You're the saint of Nanjiang. You're also respected by tens of thousands of people, Su Qingchen said. Respected by tens of thousands of people? I haven't seen my mother since I was 3 years old. I've been alone since I was 5 years old. He was not allowed to talk to the maids, not allowed to go out to play, not allowed to cry, not allowed to see outsiders, and not even allowed to be tempted. When I'm 28, I still have to go to that damn holy land. Who wants to go to that damn place? Nanzhao is mine. Everything is mine. The woman screamed as if she had suddenly broken down. Su Qingchen shook his head. The life of the saint of Nanjiang is indeed very pitiful. But I don't think that includes you. No one has ever restricted your actions, right? Otherwise, how could you have the chance to meet King Li and become enemies with Princess Anxi? Even, the new saint of Nanjiang had already appeared 2 years ago. He just killed her. The saint of Nanjiang can be 28 years old at the latest. But in fact, most saint of Nanjiang abdicate before 25. Anxi even told you this. The woman stared at him. Seems that she really trusts you. I'm friends with Princess Anxi. The breakdown just now seemed to be an illusion. Or it could be called acting. The woman regained her elegance in a moment. Good friend. I'll send the heads of your friends and your fiancé to you. With that, the woman flicked her sleeves and left. Su Qingchen frowned as he watched the stone door close again. The saint of Nanjiang was gradually losing her mind. As long as everything went according to the plan he and Princess Anxi had discussed in the past 6 months, they would definitely be able to take down the saint of Nanjiang and King Li's forces in Nanjiang without shedding a drop of blood. So now was the time to think about how to escape. Since he had achieved his goal beyond his expectations, there was no point in staying here any longer. And the later it would be, the more dangerous it would be. The stone door was pushed open from the outside again. Su Qingchen said indifferently, Miss, is there anything else? Miss, it's nothing. Brother Chink, it's me. There was a crisp laughter at the door. Su Qingchen was startled and quickly turned to look at the door. Beside the half-opened stone door, a pretty girl in a light yellow dress was looking at him with a smile. Yi Li stepped forward and looked around the stone room with a smile. Big brother, it seems that you're doing well here. Su Qingchen looked at her with a smile and said, Li, why are you here? Yi Li winked at him and pointed at the half-open stone door. She smiled and said, Come and welcome Master Qingchen. Chapter 197. Su Qingchen looked at the door thoughtfully. There's someone else outside? Yi Li pulled Su Qingchen and smiled. Let's not talk about this for now. Go. It won't be good if that woman comes back. Su Qingchen nodded. Lear is right. Let's talk about it outside. For example, I suddenly have a fiancé. The smile on Yi Li's face froze. After a while she laughed and said, Brother Qingchen, remember to call me Tu Liun when you go out. It's easy to be suspicious if you don't even know your fiancé's name. Su Qingchen tidied up a little and took a few things from the table. He then followed Yi Li out of the stone door. Outside the door, an heir was waiting with 2 unfamiliar shadow guards. When they saw Yi Li and Su Qingchen come out, they heaved a sigh of relief and said, Young Master Qingchen is indeed here. Miss, let's go out of the palace. How's that woman? An heir said, Princess Anxi brought people to the Saints' Hall according to our information. With those corpses, that woman will definitely have her eyes on her because of Princess Anxi. They must be waiting for you at the Saint Ladies' Hall. Yili nodded in satisfaction. What about the palace? An heir said, young Master Han will create chaos in the palace, and we can take the opportunity to leave. Yili nodded. I hope Han Mingxi is reliable this time. An heir lowered his head and laughed. Young Master Han asked San to pass the message. I guarantee that he won't disappoint you. I hope so. The two shadow guards protected Su Qingchen while an heir and Yili stood in front and behind. Sure enough, as they had expected, a long tunnel connected the Imperial Palace and the Sacred Maiden Hall. Although the mountain behind the Imperial Palace was not completely hollowed out like the Lui tribe, there were still a few stone rooms connected to the tunnel. Su Qingchen was under house arrest in one of them. With Yili and the others leading the way, the group naturally quickly arrived at the exit of the Imperial Palace. Su Qingchen frowned and asked, where is the exit? An heir said with some regret, it's in the Nanzhao King's bedroom. That saintess of the southern wilderness is so crazy, yet Nanzhao King still dares to build a secret passage in his bedroom. Isn't he afraid of being killed by the saintess of the southern wilderness? Su Qingchen wasn't surprised and said faintly, under normal circumstances, Southern Border's holy maiden will be absolutely loyal to Nanzhao King. An heir was puzzled, then what's going on now? Yili interrupted, let's talk about it when we get back. An heir hurriedly complied and walked forward to carefully push open the mechanism of the secret passage. The heavy boulder was moved away, and an empty palace appeared in front of everyone's eyes. When the group of 5 walked out, an heir then sealed the mechanism of the secret passage again. The 2 secret guards were the first to dash out, just in time to pull in the 2 guards at the door who had come to investigate after hearing the commotion. The 2 guards didn't even have time to groan before they quietly fell to the ground. Su Qingchen glanced at Yili, who had a calm expression, and his eyes moved slightly. He reached out and pulled Yili to his side. Yili raised her head and smiled faintly at him. Big brother, let's go out quickly. Su Qingchen nodded. Coming out of Nanzhao King's gorgeous bedroom, they didn't encounter too many guards along the way. A few guards were also taken care of by the 2 shadow guards and an heir. Because the route had been planned in advance, it didn't take much effort for the group to get out of the palace and stand at the secret place that Han Mingxi had prepared for them in advance. Junwei. This young master's back. Why haven't you come out to greet me? The group didn't have time to sit down to drink water and catch their breath. Han Mingxi's incomparably coquettish voice sounded outside the courtyard. Just as he turned around, a shadow fell from the top of the wall and pounced in the direction of Yili, young Master Han. And San, who was following behind him, broke out in cold sweat and hurriedly called out. Su Qingchen and an heir beside Yili also stepped forward to block Han Mingxi's figure. Su Qingchen's smile was warm and cold. Young Master Han, what are you doing? Only then did Han Mingxi see clearly that the person standing beside Su Qingchen wasn't his beloved younger brother Junwei, but a delicate young girl wearing a light yellow robe. Yili hurriedly retreated behind Su Qingchen, only sticking out half of her face. Big brother Qingchen, Han Mingxi saw that the young girl seemed to have been frightened by him and couldn't help but feel ashamed. He, young Master Feng Yu, had dominated the Sea of Flowers for more than a decade. When had he ever done such a disrespectful thing to a beautiful young girl? In order to maintain his image at the banquet, Han Mingxi immediately put on young Master Feng Yu's signature smile and raised an eyebrow behind Su Qingchen. In a gentle voice he said, Miss, I'm really sorry. This one is Han Mingxi. Did I scare you just now? This humble one apologizes for his mistake. Yili hid behind Su Qingchen and said crisply, no need. But young master, please don't do this in the future. After all, there are differences between men and women. Han Mingxi's mouth twitched. He really wasn't a lecher. He just thought that the person standing beside Su Qingchen was Junwei, okay? But then again, where did his younger brother Junwei go? Zhuijing. Where did my younger brother Junwei go? You're all here. Why is he missing? Yili couldn't help but look up at the sky. Who's your younger brother? An heir's face darkened. He silently looked at Han Mingxi's unforgiving expression and said, young master didn't say that he would come here. Han Mingxi was dissatisfied. Why didn't Junwei come here? An heir said, this is the place that young master asked young Master Han to prepare for young Master Su. Han Mingxi glanced at the elegant young Master Qingchen unhappily. He didn't know why he felt a little sour in his heart. he said sadly, but I prepared it for Junwei. An heir couldn't help but roll his eyes. Our young master has a place to live. Han Mingshi curled his lips and said, how can the place you live be more comfortable than the place I prepared? If I knew that Junwei didn't want to live here, I wouldn't have bothered so much. After saying that, he didn't forget to glare at Su Qingchen. Su Qingchen saw this and smiled faintly. Thank you for your trouble, young Master Han. Han Mingshi snorted and waved the folding fan in his hand. Seeing that you are Junwei's elder brother, this young master won't argue with you. Where's Junwei? Since he isn't with us or you, where is he now? An heir quickly glanced at Yili and said, When we came back, young Master Chu received a message and left first. He said that he had something to deal with first. He will come back later and we will meet. I see. Han Mingshi was skeptical. Perhaps it was because an heir's slightly serious face was very trustworthy, but in the end Han Mingshi snorted and left. Seeing Han Mingshi disappear in the yard, Su Qingchen turned around and smiled at Yili. Little sister, it seems that many things have happened on your way to Nanjiang? Yili smiled at Su Qingchen to please him. With Su Qingchen's intelligence, it wasn't difficult for him to guess that Chu Junwei and Chu Luyun were the same person. Su Qingchen smiled at Yili's uneasy look and nodded. It just so happens that you and Big Brother haven't seen each other for almost a year. Let's go in and have a chat? Yili helplessly blinked and moved aside. She softly said, Big Brother, please. Chapter 198. In the study, Su Qingchen sat behind the desk and calmly looked at the guilty-looking Yili. Yili stood at the side with her head lowered. Her eyes darted around and she would secretly look up at Su Qingchen from time to time. Just like how the previous generation of the Su family was most afraid of Su Hongyu, the current generation of the Su family was most afraid of Su Qingchen. This included Yili, who was often in the Su family when she was young. Big Brother. Seeing that Su Qingchen was just calmly staring at her without saying anything, Yili softly called out in grievance. Su Qingchen looked at her pitiful appearance and sighed. I haven't seen you for a long time. Well, you've grown up. You actually know how to act pitiful in front of Big Brother? Yili blinked and pouted. Big Brother. I'm not acting pitiful. Why are you angry? Su Qingchen raised his brows and said, I don't know why Big Brother is angry. Yili shook her head. Su Qingchen asked, who is Chu Junwei? Who is Chu Luyun? It was a waste of energy to beat around the bush with Big Brother. Yili lowered her head in defeat. Big Brother. Su Qingchen pointed at the chair in front of him and said, sit down. Sit down and tell me slowly. Yili sat down obediently on the chair. Then she recounted everything in detail, from being schemed against by Yi Yu in the capital to finding Su Qingchen in Nanjiang. When Yili finished, she realized that her mouth was dry. She looked up and saw Su Qingchen handing her a cup of tea. Yili smiled slightly and hurriedly took a sip. After she drank the tea to moisten her throat, Su Qingchen looked at her and said lightly, I won't tell you about being schemed against by Yi Yu first. Why did you specially go to Guangling to find Han Mingshi? You even brought him to Nanjiang? Yili softly said, I didn't want to alarm the people in the capital, so it wasn't convenient for me to use King Ding's shadow guard. Han Mingshi came here of his own accord, I didn't bring him here. Su Qingchen looked at her with a faint smile and said, it's a good idea not to alarm the people in the capital. However, have you asked about the relationship between Han Mingyue and Prince Ding? What if outsiders find out that you, the future imperial consort, went to the Tianyi Pavilion under an assumed name? Most importantly, if Han Mingyue really wanted to investigate, would he not be able to find out your identity? What will you do if he makes things difficult for you? Yili looked up at Su Qingchen's still smiling handsome face. I left Dark 4 to monitor the Wind and Moon Pavilion. If Han Mingyue comes back, he will inform me immediately. Moreover, I didn't ask the Tianyi Pavilion to do what was really important to me. I just want the Tianyi Pavilion to distract the Shadow Guard. Su Qingchen nodded and said, you've crossed the line. Then, who told you to provoke Sickly Scholar? Big Brother, you also know Sickly Scholar? Yili asked. Although Sickly Scholar was famous, he was a member of the Jianghu. Yili was curious that Su Qingchen knew this person. Su Qingchen looked at her indifferently. Ling Taihan, the first master of the Yanwang Chamber of Commerce, is my friend. Yili was speechless. She looked up at the sky silently in her heart. She was just thinking about how to scheme against Sickly Scholar, but sickly scholar was still a dangerous existence. Big brother, if I do something to sickly scholar, it won't affect your friendship with Pavilion Masterling, right? Su Qingchen raised his eyebrows and said, what do you want to do to him? Yi Li frowned and told him about the Biluo flower in detail. After listening to her, Su Qingchen was silent for a moment before saying, so, you're worried that he will harm Prince Ding if he gets the Biluo flower, so you want to get rid of this hidden danger first. At the same time, you think that the Biluo flower may be helpful to Prince Ding's illness, so you want to get the Biluo flower too? You're really considerate of Mo Shuyao. It's obvious that you really think of yourself as the future princess consort. Father and uncle have always been worried that you're too calm, but I'm sure they don't want to see you place too much importance on Prince Ding. Hearing Su Qingchen say this, Yi Li suddenly felt a bit embarrassed. Big brother, what are you saying? Mo Shuyao has always been good to me. Since I'm already married to him, I naturally want him to be well. Could it be that big brother wants him to die quickly and your poor cousin to become a widow? Seeing Yi Li's forceful and confident appearance, Su Qingchen smiled. He coughed lightly and said, forget it. You should be careful about sickly scholar. As for Ling Taihan, I'll talk to him. I won't let the Yanwang Chamber of Commerce make trouble for you. Thank you, big brother. Yi Li smiled. Su Qingchen looked at her with a half smile and said, no need to thank me, cousin Li. Let's talk about my fiancé now. That's right, I've already sent a pigeon back to the capital to inform the people who should be informed. How can you be like this? No, how can you be so fast? Yi Li felt a headache when she thought about how many letters she would receive because of this matter and how she would be lectured by her eldest and second uncles in the future. Su Qingchen smiled and said, actually, when I heard that my fiancé was coming to Nanzhao, I had someone send a letter back. Or do you think that big brother won't be able to send a letter outside because he's under house arrest? There should be a reply in at most 5 days. Mimi. Yi Li couldn't help but want to hold her head and groan. Big brother was really too bad. Capital. Prince, a secret letter from Yunzhou. In the study, Chief Steward Mo quickly walked in with a letter sealed with a black flame. Chapter 199. Mo Shuyao shook his head and said, originally Mr. Shen was supposed to depart for Xiling in a few days, but now I'm afraid I'll have to ask Mr. Shen to postpone it. Xin Yang frowned and said, Prince's plan has changed? Mo Shuyao sighed and said, it's too late. Mr. Shen, I need to make a trip to Nanjiang. What? Xin Yang said loudly. Even Feng Jiao, who was sitting at the side, could not help but be stunned and frown worriedly. Xin Yang did not give Mo Shuyao a chance to speak at all. He angrily shouted at Mo Shuyao, Prince, are you joking? Your body is much better than last winter. But don't forget that this is only in comparison to last winter. Nanjiang's climate is wet and rainy, it's not suitable for your body at all. And, you know it yourself, the cold poison in your body has already gone out of control last winter. Although you tried to suppress it, your body will only get worse and worse. If you change places rashly, the cold poison may even go out of control again. Feng Jiao was somewhat puzzled. The warm climate in Nanjiang, isn't it more suitable for Prince's body? Xin Yang rolled his eyes in annoyance. If that's the case, why did we go through so much trouble for so many years? Wouldn't it be better to just let Prince go to Nanjiang to recuperate? Mr. Shen, Mo Shuyao frowned and looked at Xin Yang seriously and said in a low voice, I must go. The low and firm voice announced the speaker's unwavering will. Reason. Xin Yang said angrily, Prince, please give me a reason why you don't care about your own life. As a doctor, I at least have the right to know why my patients are sending themselves to their deaths. Mo Shuyao sighed. He was full of respect for this elder who had pulled him back from the road to the netherworld again and again. Unfortunately, he had to go against his wishes, because, if I don't go, we can only atone for our sins with our deaths in the future. Xin Yang was shocked. For Mo Shuyao to say such words, the matter was not something he could stop, or he could not stop it at all. Xin Yang seemed to have aged 10 years in an instant and said sadly, Prince, even if you go to Nanjiang with your current body, there is nothing you can do. The body that was affected by the cold poison was extremely sensitive to changes in the weather. The north was dry, even if it was not rainy, Mo Shuyao's body would be extremely weak and ache, not to mention the rainy south. Mo Shuyao wouldn't have it any better in the past than in the winter. Mo Shuyao lowered his eyes. I know you have a way. Mr. Shin, I can't go to Nanjiang like this. I want to stand up and appear in southern border in one piece. Do you understand? To Nanjiang. Feng Jiao also suddenly stood up and said, Prince, things have not reached that stage yet. Why don't we go to Nanjiang first and then we can talk about it when the time comes. Mo Shuyao looked at him calmly and said, You should know that if I can't go to Nanjiang, it will be too late when things really reach that stage. Feng Jiao lowered his head and gripped the letter in his hand, speechless. Xin Yang snorted and said, I don't care what stage things have reached, there is no way. I am a doctor, not an assassin, I will not let you do that. Mo Shuyao ignored him and said lightly to Feng Jiao, Go and prepare, I will go to the palace. Feng Jiao looked at him and did not know what to say for a long time. After a long time he could only say in a low voice, Yes, Prince. Mo Shuyao turned his hand and the wheelchair moved out of the door. When he passed by Xin Yang he said lightly, Mr. Shin, I want to see the medicine when I come back. I won't give it to you. Xin Yang finally abandoned the gentleness of a doctor and shouted loudly. Unfortunately, the person he was shouting at had already gone out. Feng Jiao looked at Xin Yang, who was so angry that his face was red, and followed him out with the letter in his hand. Xin Yang was so angry that he could only stare blankly in the study. After a long time he shouted, Are the men of the Mo family sick? Can't this world live without you? Feng Jiao looked back at the study and quickly caught up with Mo Shuyao. Mo Shuyao asked indifferently, What do you want to say? Feng Jiao was stunned for a moment and could only shake his head and say, I have nothing to say. Prince, please allow Feng-san to do as he pleases. Mo Shuyao frowned and said, You need to stay and deal with the matters in the capital. Feng Jiao raised his eyebrows, and there was a heroic spirit between his brows that he didn't usually have. Prince Feng-san is a soldier. His life's ambition is to move unhindered on the battlefield, not to control the shadow guard and gather intelligence. Mo Shuyao was stunned and he turned back to look at Feng Jiao. Too much time had passed and he had somewhat forgotten. When they were still naughty children, the red-clothed Feng Jiao stood in front of him and said that in the future he would become a peerless general who would win every battle. Then Feng Jiao gave up the Feng family's luxurious life at the age of 13, and followed him through life and death. Perhaps if it were not for that matter back then, Feng Jiao would have already become a famous general of his generation as he wished, and would not have been forced to stay in the capital like he was now, using the image of a dissolute and unruly young master to appear in front of the world, just to conceal his identity as the commander of the hidden guards. After a long time, Mo Shuyao said in a low voice, All right, if they really, then they should know about your relationship with the Ding Palace. I will make other arrangements for the Shadow Guard. At that time, Feng Jiao had anonymously followed him on the battlefield. Not many people knew about it, but it wasn't that there weren't any. Feng Jiao was overjoyed. Thank you, Prince. Mo Shuyao smiled faintly and replied, I should be the one thanking you. Also, send someone to send a letter to Li on a fast horse. Be careful of Shu Manlin. Nanzhao capital Yi Li helplessly looked at the hostile Han Mingxi and the indifferent Su Qingchen in front of her. Young Master Han. Han Mingxi snorted and turned his face to Yi Li with a smile. Lun Mimi, there's no need to be so polite. Since you also know Junwei, you can just call me Brother Mingxi. Yi Li looked at him speechlessly and swallowed back the words she wanted to say. Han Mingxi saw that the little beauty was ignoring him and shrugged his shoulders regretfully. He looked at Yi Li and said, Speaking of which, Lun Mimi and Junwei are really similar. Actually, Junwei isn't young Master Qingchen's younger brother, but Lun Mimi's brother, right? Aren't both of you surnamed Chu? Yi Li silently wiped her sweat in her heart. Brother Qingchen is really Junwei's elder brother. Han Mingxi rolled his eyes and blinked innocently at Yi Li. Then Junwei's name is definitely not real? Lun Mimi, can you tell Big Brother? What is Junwei's name? Yi Li's heart was filled with bitterness. She secretly regretted asking Han Mingxi for help in the first place. She looked pleadingly at Su Qingchen, who was leisurely drinking tea. Su Qingchen raised her eyebrows and said indifferently, Su Qinglu. Qinglu? Good name. It's very compatible with Junwei. Unlike some people, it's a waste of a good name. No. Su Qinglu is not one of the 5 young masters of the Su family. Han Mingxi murmured. He quickly reacted and glared fiercely at Su Qingchen. Su Qingchen raised her eyebrows and said, Who told you that he's one of the 5 sons of the Su family? Han Mingxi lowered his head and thought. He didn't think so. After thinking for a moment, he raised his head and looked at Su Qingchen with a strange and conflicted expression. If you looked carefully, you could see a little bit of contempt. Yili looked at Han Mingxi helplessly. What are you thinking of now? Chapter 200. Han Mingxi snorted and looked at Su Qingchen from head to toe. He nodded and said, "This young master understands. No wonder I've never heard of Su Qingliu's name. No wonder he has to change his name when he goes out. Don't even think about bullying Qinglu in the future. No, with this name he will definitely see it. Your Su family can't bully Junwei in the future. He's under this young master's protection." Yili looked embarrassed. Su Qingchen raised his eyebrows. Young Master Han's imagination is quite good. Han Mingxi snorted. This young master's ability to beat people is even better. If it weren't for Junwei's sake, this young master wouldn't beat you up. Young Master Han. Yili called out helplessly. She was very moved by Han Mingxi's sincerity towards Chu Junwei. Thinking about how she hid it from him, she felt even more guilty. Han Mingxi glanced at her and said, "Little sister Lun, you should change your fiancé as soon as possible. Some people look like elegant gentlemen on the outside, but who knows what kind of things they are on the inside. Junwei hasn't come back for so long and he doesn't seem to be worried. I'll go look for him." After saying that, Han Mingxi went out like a gust of wind. Su Qingchen put down his teacup and said thoughtfully, "Han Mingxi is really good to you." Yili smiled bitterly. "I really regret lying to him now." Su Qingchen said lightly, "It's right to be cautious when you go out. If you explain it to him earlier, he should understand." Yili looked at him helplessly. "Then Big Brother just said something about Su Qinglu. Wouldn't I be lying to him again if I tell him later?" Su Qingchen smiled indifferently and said, "When I go back, I'll ask grandfather to record my name in the family tree. Then it won't be considered lying to him." "But you..." Yili looked at Su Qingchen in confusion. Su Qingchen shook his head and didn't say anything. "Su Qingchen." A delicate roar came from outside the door, and the door was kicked open from the outside with a bang. A sapphire blue figure rushed in. Yili couldn't help but tremble when she saw the aggressive woman. She turned around to look at Su Qingchen, but she saw that Su Qingchen was still sitting calmly and leisurely, as if the angry woman wasn't here for him. When the woman reached the entrance of the hall, she couldn't stop and stared at Su Qingchen in a daze. Yili blinked her eyes, coughed lightly and called out, "Princess Jejia." Princess Anshi seemed to come to her senses. She stepped into the hall and asked with concern, "Qingyan, are you all right?" Su Qingchen smiled faintly and said, "Looking at Princess's posture just now, I thought that Princess was here to settle accounts with me." Princess Anshi's face turned red. She glared at him and said, "Shouldn't I be the one getting even with you? What have you done in the palace?" Su Qingchen smiled innocently and said, "I didn't do anything." "He didn't do anything. Everything was done by the Shadow Guard and the Tianyi Pavilion." Princess Anshi walked to the side and sat down. She glared at Su Qingchen and said with dissatisfaction, "You didn't do anything, but you made a mess in the palace. Father just summoned me to the palace to question me. He suspects that I did it." She was prepared to do that, but didn't someone else beat her to it? Why did father still suspect her? Su Qingchen raised his eyebrows and said, "You know that the king of Nanzhao suspects you. Why did you still come here?" Princess Anshi raised her eyebrows disdainfully and said, "Those good-for-nothings can only keep up with me if I want them to. I don't want them to be unable to keep up with me even if they break their legs." "Princess, why are you in such a hurry to come here?" Su Qingchen asked. Yili watched from the side and sighed in her heart. Princess Anshi came here in such a hurry because she was worried about her brother's safety. But he just asked her indifferently, "Why are you here?" Did he expect the girl to say that she was worried about his safety? Princess Anshi was stunned. She glanced at Yili and raised her eyebrows, saying, "Can't I come here for no reason? This princess has to come and see if my friend and military advisor is still alive." Su Qingchen shook his head and said, "I also have something to talk to you about. Since you're here, I don't need to send people to the princess mansion to look for you." Princess Anshi frowned and looked at Su Qingchen, saying, "You're not going back to the princess mansion?" She hesitated and glanced at Yili, saying, "Miss Chu is living in my mansion now. You can take care of her if you go back with her." Isn't it convenient for us to discuss anything? Yili thought for a while and said before Su Qingchen spoke, Princess, I'm really sorry that I lied to you before. Princess Anshi frowned in confusion. Yili said in a low voice, that, Actually, Luyun is not a weak woman who can't even trust a chicken. Today she and Lin Han entered the palace to save me. I was afraid that you would be suspicious, so I pretended that I didn't know anything. Su Qingchen said indifferently. Yili raised her eyebrows and glared at Su Qingchen. Su Qingchen was as still as a mountain. Princess Anshi looked at him strangely. She looked at Yili and smiled, saying, That's nothing. It's rare to see a girl from the Central Plains who is good at both the pen and the sword like Miss Chu. Miss Chu did it for Qingchen's safety. I'm not such a petty person. Yili said with a smile, Thank you, Princess. The three of them moved to the study. Although Princess Anshi had some doubts about Yili's existence, she trusted Su Qingchen and didn't ask any more questions. After all, the delicate girl in front of her had brought someone all the way to Nanzhao and successfully tricked her into saving Su Qingchen. Naturally, she wasn't an ordinary person. Princess Anshi looked at Yili with a complicated gaze. Yili could only smile bitterly in her heart. She glared at Su Qingchen secretly and gave him a look that said, Explain it to me later. Su Qingchen smiled indifferently and didn't say anything. After entering the study and sitting down, Princess Anshi quickly put the previous private matter to the back of her mind and became serious and focused. Su Qingchen asked, Did you get the commander's seal? Princess Anshi shook her head in shame, saying, I'm sorry, Qingchen. The place where we found the commander's seal was just a cover. It wasn't there at all. Su Qingchen frowned slightly, saying, Logically speaking, Shu Manlin shouldn't know that we're looking for the commander's seal. No outsider should know where the real commander's seal is. Why did she hide the military book so well and make it look like a trap for us? Princess Anshi shook her head, saying, Not many people on our side know about it. I can guarantee that they're all trustworthy. Su Qingchen shook her head. Of course we can trust your people. But this time, Anshi, don't you think there's something strange about it? In the past 6 months, it seems that every time we're about to catch Shu Manlin's fatal mistake, she'll escape first. Princess Anshi said angrily, It's all because of Father. Father is always partial to Shu Manlin for no reason. He says she's the saintess of Nanjiang and can't do those things. He says you're trying to sow discord between us. The most ridiculous thing is that it's a misunderstanding. Father is getting more and more muddle-headed these years. Chapter 201. Su Qingchen asked thoughtfully, Is the king of Nanzhao really senile? Princess Anshi was startled. She looked sideways at Su Qingchen and asked, What do you mean? Su Qingchen said lightly, We all thought that the king of Nanzhao was biased towards Shu Manlin, but this time, I was drugged and unconscious after I was caught that day. But I remember that I fainted around the end of the afternoon and woke up in the stone room around the quarter of the afternoon. You had already sent people to watch the Saint Ladies' Hall that day, so they could only go back through the palace. But the king of Nanzhao was usually resting in his bedroom during that time. Even if he wasn't there, the guards at the entrance of the secret passage weren't just for show. After that, Anshi, did you hear any rumors about this after you entered the palace? Princess Anshi thought for a moment and shook her head. No. When I reported your disappearance to my father, he was very worried and said he would send people to help me find you. But I refused. Su Qingchen smiled faintly. How could the king of Nanzhao not know what happened in his bedroom? Especially when he clearly has people guarding that secret passage at all times. Princess Anshi was startled for a long time. She looked up at Su Qingchen with disbelief and hesitation. You mean that my father wasn't deceived by Shu Manlin at all, and he was biased towards Shu Manlin and helping her? But I'm my father's daughter, the crown princess of Nanzhao. I've never done anything unworthy of my status. Maybe it's because the princess is too worthy of your status? Yili raised her eyebrows and said softly. Princess Anshi glanced at her sharply. What do you mean, Miss Chu? Yili blinked and looked at Princess Anshi. There's a saying in the Central Plains. I don't know if the princess has heard of it before? Princess Anshi looked at her silently. Yili said in a low voice, High merit overshadows the ruler. The princess and the king of Nanzhao are naturally father and daughter. But, although the princess calls the king of Nanzhao father, in my opinion he should be the king's father. In the royal family he should be the king first, then the father. And the princess is the same. She should be the subject first, then the daughter. These days in Nanzhao's capital, I've heard quite a bit of the princess' reputation. The people of Nanzhao praised the princess as a wise and far-sighted crown princess. Even a person of the Central Plains like me who has just arrived in Nanzhao has such an impression, let alone the common people of Nanjiang who have been graced by the princess. Princess Anqi paled and said in a trembling voice, "Are you saying that my father is afraid of me? Is that why you supported Xu Manlin to go against me and suppress me?" Yili sighed softly and looked at Princess Anqi with pity. "Your Highness, you must have read some history books of the Central Plains. Let's not talk about the distant ones, let's talk about the recent ones. Although your Highness is in the southern border, I'm sure you have some understanding of the situation in King Ding's residence?" Princess Anqi's pale lips trembled as she looked at Su Qingchen for help. Su Qingchen sighed softly. "I once reminded you that going too far is as bad as not going far enough." Princess Anqi bit her lip and lowered her head in silence. Going too far was as bad as falling short. He had said this to her when they first met 4 years ago. But she didn't really take it to heart. Because she truly wanted the good of Nanzhao. She could tell anyone with a clear conscience that she never had any selfish motives. She thought that as long as she worked hard to share her father's burdens, her father would be happy. She thought that as long as Nanzhao became rich and powerful and the common people lived in peace, her sister Xixia wouldn't have to go through a political marriage. But in the end Xixia went to Dechu State to hide her identity and marry a man as a concubine. Her father had been secretly plotting how to keep her in check. Then all her efforts over the years, what were the things she had done? Looking at Princess Anqi's devastated expression, Yili and Su Qingchen could only look at her silently. Such a blow was not something that could be resolved with a few words of comfort. Princess Anqi had to figure it out herself. The atmosphere in the study was solemn. Princess Anqi sat in her chair with her head lowered. Although nothing could be seen from her appearance, she was gripping the armrest so tightly that her fingers turned white. It was obvious that she was not calm at all. Yili praised in her heart. At least Princess Anqi knew how to control herself. This was rare, especially among women. After a long while, Princess Anqi looked up and broke the silence in the study. "If I give up everything now, will Father, Anqi?" Su Qingchen frowned and shook his head. "I don't know what the king of Nanzhao will do, but Xu Manlin, Anqi, Xu Manlin hates you. Do you understand? She won't let you go at all. And she will definitely drag Nanzhao into hell. Is this what you want to see?" Anqi looked at him in confusion. "I know she hates me. At most I'll go to the Central Plains, Xiling or the northern tribes. What do you think she wants the commander's seal for? She wants to mobilize the guards of the capital to besiege your residence? I've talked to her a few times. She is very ambitious, but she doesn't have the strength to match her ambition," Su Qingchen said. Princess Anqi's expression was solemn. She looked at Su Qingchen hesitantly. "You mean, she wants to," Su Qingchen said, "ask Lian what she did at the border between Nanzhao and the Dechu state?" Princess Anqi turned to Yili. Yili said in a low voice, "On our way to Nanjiang, we found a man-made snake valley not far from Shattered Snow Pass. Hidden behind the snake valley was a very large weapon refinery. All the weapons inside were the weapons used by the Dechu state soldiers. But I found some other things inside. Also, the one who controls this weapon refinery is the chief of the Lui tribe, Lujiang. Man-made Snake Valley? She wants to make Dechu State's weapons? What does she want to do?" Princess Anqi said angrily. The people of Nanjiang liked snakes, but they didn't like Nanjiang becoming a place full of poisonous snakes. So when Mo Shuyao set fire to the Snake Valley, it didn't arouse too much hatred from the people of Nanjiang. She didn't expect that in less than 10 years, another Snake Valley would appear in Nanjiang. As for making weapons from another country in Nanjiang, that crossed Princess Anqi's bottom line. Who knew if these weapons would be used against the people of Nanjiang one day? In Princess Anqi's eyes, this was treason. Did royal father know all of this? Was he kept in the dark by Xu Manlin, or was he pretending not to know? Or did royal father agree to Xu Manlin's plan? Su Qingchen said, "Isn't it obvious? King Li helped the Saintess of Nanzhao obtain Nanzhao. In return, Xu Manlin will help King Li obtain Dechu State." "Idiot!" Princess Anqi scolded. Helping King Li obtain Dechu State was easier said than done. How big of a price would it have to pay? Not to mention the losses Nanzhao would suffer if they failed. Even if they succeeded, what benefits would Nanzhao receive? At that time, Nanzhao would have to rely on Mo Jingli just like Nanjiang hundreds of years ago. I want to go to the palace and ask royal father, Princess Anshi said in unison. Chapter 202. Anshi. Su Qingchen looked at her disapprovingly. Princess Anshi looked back at the two and said in a low voice, "You don't have to persuade me. I don't know why you came to Nanzhao, but if it wasn't for you, I would have been tricked by Shu Manlin long ago. So I still have to thank you. You are outsiders and this is the capital of Nanzhao. It may not be difficult for you to escape unscathed, but if father really decides to fall out with us, you won't be able to hold on for long. Leave Nanzhao as soon as possible. I'll do what I have to do." Su Qingchen said, "Is it something you should do as the crown princess of Nanjiang to throw yourself into a trap?" Princess Anshi smiled bitterly. The title of crown princess was bestowed by father. If father is determined to side with Shu Manlin, even 10 crown princesses won't be able to do anything. I must go and have a talk with father. Looking at Princess Anshi's resolute expression, the two knew they couldn't persuade her. Su Qingchen said in a low voice, "Anshi, take care." Anshi smiled and said, "Don't worry. I'm father's only daughter now. He won't kill me." Seeing Princess Anshi's figure disappear at the door, Yili sighed and asked Su Qingchen, "Brother, aren't you moved at all? Princess Anshi is the most special woman I've ever seen." Su Qingchen glanced at her indifferently and said, "What nonsense are you talking about? Princess Anshi and I are friends." Yili blinked. "Then why didn't you let me tell Princess Anshi the truth? That means you know it in your heart, right?" Su Qingchen looked at her angrily. "Do you spend all your time thinking about these things? It's impossible to begin with. Why do you have to worry about it?" Yili nodded. "I understand. Princess Anshi is a proud woman. She knows you have a fiancé, so she won't have any thoughts about you in the future. But brother, you haven't been using this method to block your luck in love all these years, have you? Let me say this first, I was in the wrong this time. Don't even think about using me as a shield in the future." Su Qingchen raised his hand and threw a booklet to Yili. Yili caught it and looked at the handwriting on it. It was a report from the Tianyi Pavilion on the situation in the capital of Nanzhao. Her heart sank. "Brother, will Princess Anshi be all right?" Su Qingchen shook his head and said, "Even a vicious tiger will not eat its cubs. Princess Xixia is already a dead person. Anshi is indeed the only daughter of the Nanzhao king. Once something happens to Anshi, Nanzhao can only be handed over to the side branch of the imperial family to inherit. And the king of Nanzhao is not very prestigious. It is very likely that he will be removed from the throne because there is no successor." Yili raised her eyebrows in surprise. "There's such a rule? Nanjiang is different from our central plains. Daughters can also inherit the throne, but there is no such thing as adoption. If there is no heir, the people of Nanjiang will think that because the king of Nanzhao is not protected by the gods, he is unable to protect his people, so it is natural for him to abdicate." Yili nodded. "It is good that there is no danger. We can make other plans in the future." Mississippi, an heir appeared at the door. "What is it?" "Just now the Tianyi Pavilion sent news that Master Liang can't take it anymore. Sickly Scholar took Master Liang to the place where the treasure is hidden. Young Master Han also rushed over." An heir said in a low voice. "Damn it, why is he joining in the fun? Why is everything happening at the same time?" Yili cursed in a low voice. She raised her head and ordered, "You and an heir get ready. We will go immediately." "Yes." An heir quickly disappeared at the door. Yili turned to Su Qingchen and said, "Brother, I have to go first. If there is anything you need, just tell the shadow guard to do it. Since Princess Anshi said so, shouldn't you leave Nanzhao as soon as possible?" Su Qingchen shook his head. "I still have some things to figure out. I'm living here now. You be careful." Yili nodded. "Brother, be careful too." Yili led an heir to quickly follow the marks left by the Tianyi Pavilion and the shadow guard. Fortunately, Nanjiang was not particularly vast. The area near the capital was naturally not very large. After riding for more than 4 hours, they finally found the address mentioned in the message from the Tianyi Pavilion. They found the mark left by Han Mingxi at the foot of the mountain. "Young master, it is here. They have entered the mountain." Yili nodded. She turned and ordered, let's go separately. An heir objected. No, it is too dangerous for young master to go alone. Yili was helpless. An heir, come with me. An heir, follow secretly. Yes. She led an heir all the way into the mountain, following the mark left by Han Mingxi. The mountain forests of Nanjiang were more humid than the north. There were all kinds of poisonous insects and plants. Fortunately, this was not a problem for the two. They went all the way in the direction of the mark. Young master, look ahead. An heir held her weapon in her hand and stared ahead vigilantly. Several men wearing the Tianyi Pavilion's uniform were lying at the foot of the small hill in front of them. The blood from their wounds had already coagulated. It was obvious that they had been dead for a long time. Yili furrowed her brows. She tilted her head and listened carefully to the surroundings. She then pointed in another direction and said, let's go that way. Anson took the lead and walked in front. Along the way they saw some corpses of the Tianyi Pavilion. An heir said in a low voice, there are no people from our side. Yili frowned deeply and kept walking forward. After walking for more than an hour, they finally heard the faint sound of weapons clashing and people talking in front of them. Chapter 203. Seeing Yili leisurely walk over with her hands behind her back, sickly scholar's eyes flashed. You really came? Yili calmly stepped forward. Her gaze swept over Han Mingxi, then slowly landed on sickly scholar. She smiled and said, Third master, it's not a good habit to burn bridges after crossing the river. Sickly scholar narrowed his eyes and snorted. Burning bridges after crossing the river? You can only blame yourself for being too greedy. Yili helplessly hit her palm with her folding fan and sighed. This world is really not what it used to be. Forget it, I'll just take it that I'm unlucky this time. Tell me, what do you want? No matter what, how about letting Han Mingxi go first? I know you're not afraid of Han Mingyue, but I think Ling Taihan wouldn't want you to provoke the Tianyi Pavilion. How dare you threaten me with Big Brother? Yili waved the folding fan in her hand and said with a smile, No, it just so happens that I have an elder brother who is Pavilion Master Ling's best friend. What's more, I told him before coming here. If something happens to us here, he'll naturally go home and report my death. Of course, he won't forget to inform young Master Mingyue and Pavilion Master Ling. What do you think? When it comes to making enemies, it's better to make as few as possible, right? Sickly scholar looked at Han Mingxi on the ground, then looked at Yili and said, All right. Han Mingxi can go. You stay. Yili nodded. No problem. Han Mingxi sat on the ground and didn't move. Yili frowned and asked, What's wrong? Are you seriously injured? Han Mingxi snorted and frowned. The cloth on his left leg was black. Obviously he was seriously injured. Yili took 2 steps forward and asked with concern, Mingxi, are you all right? Han Mingxi looked up and shook his head. I'm fine. Junwei, you don't have to worry about me. Go. Yili shook her head and smiled. You got into trouble with sickly scholar because of me. How can I leave you behind? Mingxi, it was wrong of me to lie to you before. You should call me by my real name. The name Junwei. I'm actually not too used to it. Han Mingxi's face flashed with a strange color. He nodded and said, I know. Yili smiled and said, Let me help you up. Han Mingxi nodded and raised his hand to take Yili's outstretched hand. No. The change seemed to happen in an instant. Han Mingxi's hand that was about to hold Yili suddenly changed. Like an eagle's claw, it grabbed Yili. At the same time, Yili leaned back. The hand that was holding the folding fan glowed with a brilliant silver light. Almost at the same time, a figure rushed out of the cave like lightning and threw himself at Yili. Yili frowned and the dagger in her hand flew out. Cough cough. The person who threw himself at Yili had the same face as Han Mingxi. But at this time he looked particularly embarrassed. A trace of blood flowed from the corner of his mouth. Junwei, are you okay? Yili pulled the person away and said coldly and angrily, I'm fine. The one who's not fine is you, idiot. The palm of the person opposite just hit him on the back. Yili raised her head and looked at the person like a knife. Young Master Mingyu, are you satisfied now? Han Mingxi. Han Mingyue had a dagger in her shoulder. Her dark red clothes were wet. He stared at the person supported by Yili and his eyes were full of anger. Han Mingxi, you bastard, what are you doing? Who allowed you to come out? Han Mingxi leaned weakly on Yili. Yili's body was not tall to support his slender figure. Han Mingxi also looked at the man who looked almost the same as himself. He smiled provocatively and said, I already said that you can't fool Junwei if you want to pretend to be this young master with your lousy acting skills. Also, is this young master as a bastard as you? Presumptuous. Do you want to die for a person you just met a few days ago? Do you know who she is? Han Mingyue said coldly. Han Mingxi was startled. He gritted his teeth and said, no matter who she is, she's my friend. Even if I only know her for a few days, she's still better than you. At least Junwei will come to save me. If something happens to you, who will care about your life and death? Hearing her brother's roar, Han Mingyue was obviously stunned. She looked at the two people in front of her with a complicated expression. She quickly recovered and looked at Yili. She raised her eyebrows and said, Sister-in-law, please let go of my brother first. Han Mingxi's body stiffened. He looked down at Yili in disbelief. It was as if he wanted to see what she had to make Han Mingyue call her sister-in-law. After a long while, she sneered with difficulty. Big brother, you can't be confused after being stabbed, right? Don't go around claiming to be relatives. I don't have a second big brother. Han Mingyue sneered and pointed at Yili. Han Mingxi, open your eyes and look carefully. Is the person standing in front of you a man? Or have you been outside for so long that you can't even tell the difference between a man and a woman? Yili helped Han Mingxi to the side and sat down. Then she slowly pushed him away and looked at Han Mingxi apologetically. Brother Han Mingxi, I'm sorry I lied to you. Han Mingxi stared at her for a long time. Then he unwillingly curled his lips and said, all right, I know you're a woman. Seeing that we've gone through life and death together, you should at least tell me which sister-in-law you are, right? I don't want to hear that bastard say it. Yili looked back at sickly scholar who was staring at her with hatred and Han Mingyue who was stupefied. She whispered, my name is Yili. Yili. Su Qingchen is your big brother. That's right, Su Qingchen is your big brother. Your third Miss Yi. Your. Han Mingxi stared at him. His expression was as uncomfortable as if he had swallowed a fly. He had seen third Miss Yi before. The problem was, how did this handsome young man look like that sly rich young lady who pretended to be elegant? He had already sworn to stay away from that woman. Why was he still hanging around her these days? You lied to me. Han Mingxi accused. Yili apologized. I'm sorry. Just because you're sorry? I want compensation. I want 10% of the Fragrant Elegance Pavilion. Yili nodded readily. No problem. Han Mingxi narrowed his eyes and continued to raise his conditions. At least 4 bottles of new perfume every year. Yili hesitated for a moment but still nodded. Han Mingxi tilted his head and looked at her for a while. He seemed to be assessing whether her words were trustworthy or not. After a while he raised his head and said proudly, since it's like this young master reluctantly forgives you for lying. I also admit that you Yili are my Han Mingxi's friend. Yili didn't know whether to laugh or cry. She said helplessly, thank you brother Han for being so magnanimous. Han Mingxi still snorted in dissatisfaction. He looked at Han Mingyue in disdain and said, see? You still have the nerve to say that you know how to make money. The Han family is really counting on you to not starve to death. Han Mingyue's face darkened. She glared at Han Mingxi and said, it's too late to talk nonsense. If you're done then scram to the side. Han Mingxi rolled his eyes at him. Are you stupid? This woman is my friend. She's my future business partner. Why don't you try touching her? Chapter 204. Han Mingxi. Han Mingyue sternly said. This young master knows what his name is. Han Mingxi lazily leaned against the hillside and picked at his ears. Young Master Han. Have you finished reminiscing? If you don't make a move, it will be too late when the people from the Ding Kingdom's estate arrive. Sickly Scholar's voice sounded sinisterly behind him. Han Mingyue lightly snorted and casually pulled out the dagger from his shoulder and threw it to the side. The injury on his shoulder caused him to involuntarily knit his brows. He indifferently looked at Han Mingxi and said, Mingxi, stand to the side. Don't force me to make a move. Han Mingxi clenched his teeth and forcefully stood in front of Yili. He said, you can touch her if you want to, but you have to hit me first. Han Mingyue didn't say anything else and reached out to grab Han Mingxi's shoulder. Han Mingxi had just suffered a palm strike. Although Han Mingyue promptly withdrew her inner strength, he still suffered a serious internal injury. At this moment his left arm was simply too weak. Moreover, he wasn't Han Mingyue's opponent to begin with. Yi Li, who was standing behind Han Mingxi, pulled the person in front of her and pushed him away. At the same time, she didn't forget to block Han Mingyue's moves. Yi Li's inner strength was lacking, but she was extremely skilled in close combat. Every move she made was not the least bit fanciful. Every time the silver dagger flashed in her hand, it would always bring about a moderate amount of blood. Han Mingyue couldn't help but frown at such a murderous fighting style. He consecutively sent out a few palm strikes and retreated several meters. I haven't seen you for almost a year. I didn't expect sister-in-law's skills to have improved so rapidly. If Yi Li was able to catch him off guard a year ago, then this time the two of them were relying on real martial arts. Yi Li faintly frowned and said, I don't dare to accept the title of sister-in-law. Mr. Han, I did business with the Tianyi Pavilion at a clear price, but now you're selling me to someone else. Is this how you do business? Could it be that Tianyi Pavilion thrives on deceiving customers? Han Mingyue's expression was as sincere and helpless as ever. Wang Fei is still as humorous as ever. In this world, there were always many things that made people feel helpless. Even if they didn't want to do it, they still had to do it. Isn't that so? Yi Li raised her eyebrows and smiled. If Mo Shuyao were here right now, would you say that it was a misunderstanding again? Han Mingyue smiled but didn't say anything. Sickly Scholar sneered, if Mo Shuyao is here, he'll die with you. Yi Li turned to look at the restless Sickly Scholar and said with a faint smile, Third Pavilion Master, I advise you not to act rashly. If anything happens, I won't be able to explain it to Pavilion Master Ling. Sickly Scholar sneered angrily and took a step forward, wanting to say something. With a whoosh, 2 arrows, one from the left and one from the right, brushed past him one after the other and landed on the ground less than a foot away from him. Sickly Scholar's face turned pale. Yi Li smiled and said, I've already told Third Pavilion Master that I don't like to take risks. Seeing Sickly Scholar's ugly expression, Han Mingyue chuckled and said, Sister-in-law, you don't have to scare us. I've already lured the shadow guard away. Now that you're in such a hurry, there are at most 2 or 3 people with you. Yi Li smiled and said, even so, there are still 3 of us. What about you, Mr. Mingyue? Han Mingxi sat on the ground and said in a clear voice, not 3, it's 4. Clearly he was determined to stand against his older brother. Han Mingyue ignored her younger brother and stared at Yi Li with a smile. Last time in Jing, Wang Fei made me look at you in a different light. This time you've surprised me even more. The Ding Wang Fei has disguised herself as a man and come alone to Nanjiang. Presumably, the commotion in the palace yesterday was also Wang Fei's doing? Yi Li said faintly, Mingyu Gongzi was able to set up such a trap here today. Presumably you've been in Nanzhao for a long time. Why ask when you already know the answer? Han Mingyue raised an eyebrow and said, it was just a coincidence. If I knew Wang Fei was here, I would have prepared well and wouldn't have taken such a risk. Yi Li raised an eyebrow and said with a smile, then, does Mingyu Gongzi think you can kill me today? Han Mingyue shook her head and said with a laugh, Wang Fei misunderstands. With Ding Wang Fei in hand, how many things can be done? If I kill you like this, wouldn't it spoil the fun? Han Mingyue. Sickly Scholar shouted in dissatisfaction. The reason why he cooperated with Han Mingyue's plan was to kill Mo Shuyao's wife. What did Han Mingyue mean now? His malicious eyes stared coldly at the handsome man in front of him. If he dared to use him and didn't fulfill his promise, he would let him know why no one dared to provoke Sickly Scholar in Jianghu. Han Mingyue looked at Sickly Scholar and said with a faint smile, Third Pavilion Master, Ding Wang Fei really can't be killed yet. Although Third Pavilion Master is from Xiling, you should have heard of the surging winds in Dechu State's capital these past 6 months. If we kill Ding Wang Fei now, I'm afraid neither you nor I will be able to escape the pursuit of Ding Wang Fu. Sickly Scholar sneered and said, Are you afraid? I'm not afraid. Who is better at killing than the Yanwang Chamber of Commerce? Han Mingyue helplessly lowered her head and said with a bitter smile, I'm really a little afraid. Third Pavilion Master, I'll take Ding Wang Fei away today. If Third Pavilion Master needs any help in the future, Han Mingyue will agree. Moreover, the one who has a grudge against you is Mo Shuyao, not his wife. If you kill her, you'll at most make Mo Shuyao lose face. It won't hurt you at all. Yi Li stared at young Master Mingyu in front of her with displeasure and sneered. Young Master Mingyu, when discussing the ownership of others, shouldn't you first confirm whether you really have the ownership? Third Pavilion Master, it's best not to deal with businessmen. Look at me now. Not only did I lose money, I was also sold. Han Mingyue smiled and said, My apologies, Princess Consort. The one who took your money is Han Mingxi. He didn't give a single cent to the Tianyi Pavilion, so this time at most, it can be considered that he used the power of the Tianyi Pavilion to take on a private job. As for whether I have the ownership, Han Mingyue raised her hand and a crisp sound broke through the air. A flame bloomed in the middle of the day. Yili tilted her head and clearly heard a large group of people rushing over from all directions. Does Princess Consort have anything to say now? Yili pursed her lips and smiled. She raised her hand and made 2 hand gestures in the air. It seems that I have no choice but to surrender? Princess Consort is a smart person. Han Mingyue looked at Yili's strange hand gestures. He didn't understand what they meant. However, he clearly sensed that the 2 pairs of eyes that were staring at him covetously had disappeared. Presumably they were telling the people to retreat. Every time we meet, Princess Consort's courage and insight always amazes me. Yili smiled and said, Actually, you should be more shocked by my good luck. Han Mingyue's handsome eyes darkened and he stared at her vigilantly. The people of the Tianyi Pavilion gradually surrounded them. Han Mingyue stared at Yili for a long time before she gradually relaxed. Surrounded by so many people, Yili wouldn't be able to fly out even if she had wings. Moreover, with his eyesight and the information about the sickly scholar, how could Han Mingyue not know? Yili's qinggong and internal energy were not good. Yili looked around and her expression was calm without the slightest hint of panic. Sister-in-law Shuyao and I are friends. You don't want me to be rude, right? Do you want to leave by yourself or? Han Mingyue looked at Yili and smiled warmly. The Black Cloud Cavalry knew that Princess was in Nanjiang, so they traveled through the night to pick up Princess and Qing Chen Gongzi. Yili's face sank. Nonsense, since Nanzhao's army is attacking Shattered Snow Pass, why didn't the Black Cloud Cavalry help General Mu Rong guard the border? An heir grimaced. The Black Cloud Cavalry's training in the south was done in secret. They didn't report to the Emperor beforehand. Once the Black Cloud Cavalry appears in Shattered Snow Pass, I'm afraid that the Emperor's decree will immediately reach the Ding King's Fu. In reality, the Emperor didn't want the Black Cloud Cavalry or the Mahist army to have any training. He wanted to find a place to encircle them and raise them. It would be best if they were crippled. I know, finish this quickly. Her clear eyes swept over Han Mingyue, who was still fighting. A cold light flashed through Yili's eyes. And Si didn't send a letter, which proved that Han Mingyue didn't come back and came directly from Xiling to Nanjiang. When they were in the capital, Han Mingyue wanted to bury the hatchet with Mo Shuyao. Yili believed that his thoughts at that time were true. But now that he had just arrived in Nanzhao, he didn't hesitate to kidnap her to threaten Mo Shuyao. What did he come to Nanzhao for? A well-trained army was completely different from the Jianghu. Therefore, the Black Cloud Cavalry only needed a few minutes to sweep through the entire battlefield. Sickly Scholar ran away in a sorry state. A Black Cloud Cavalry nimbly took out a bow from his back, took aim and released an arrow. The long sword shot towards Sickly Scholar's back with the force of thunder. Suddenly, a black shadow swept out and swept the sword towards the feather arrow. With 2 clangs, sparks flew in all directions. A tall and imposing man dressed in dark blue stood with a sword in his hand. He laughed in a clear voice. The Black Cloud Cavalry's unparalleled archery truly lives up to its reputation. Behind him, Sickly Scholar fell to the ground, his face white as paper. He called out in a low voice, "Big brother." The Black Cloud Cavalry all drew their bows, dozens of bows pointing towards the blue-clothed man. Yili raised her hand and said, "Stop, let Pavilion Master Ling leave." The blue-robed man was none other than the King of Hell's Pavilion Master, Ling Taihan. Ling Taihan raised his eyebrows as he looked at Yili, then cupped his hands and said, "Princess Consort, third brother is ignorant and has offended you, please forgive him." Yili nodded and smiled. "My big brother and Pavilion Master Ling are close friends. Pavilion Master need not be so polite. But third Pavilion Master's temper." Ling Taihan sighed and turned his head to glance at Sickly Scholar on the ground. "My third brother's fate is full of misfortune and his temperament is perverse. This one will definitely restrain him. This is the Yama token. In the future, if Wang Fei has any matters, just use the token to send someone to the Yanwang chamber to find me. As long as the Yama token is in my hands, third brother will definitely not make a move against Wang Fei. Yili raised her hand to catch the black iron token that Ling Taihan tossed over. She carefully put it away and said, "Many thanks to Pavilion Master." Ling Taihan bent down to pick up Sickly Scholar and said, "Since it's like this, goodbye." Chapter 206. I won't see you out. After watching Ling Taihan leave, Han Mingyue was already at the end of her rope under the attacks of several Black Cloud cavalry. She was barely holding on. The Black Cloud cavalry didn't have any thoughts of using numbers to bully the enemy. As long as they could defeat the enemy, they wouldn't feel guilty even if there were 100 of them. They were soldiers, not chivalrous people. Junwei. Han Mingxi, who had been silently watching them, walked over to Yili with his heavily injured body. Yili glanced at Han Mingyue, who was still fighting, and sighed helplessly. "I beg you, let my big brother go." Han Mingxi looked at her, his eyes full of bitterness. Although he already knew her true identity, he really wanted to be friends with her. However, he also knew that if he begged for mercy, they wouldn't be friends anymore. "I need Prince Mingyue to provide me with some information." Yili frowned. She didn't want to keep Han Mingyue alive. Han Mingyue gave her a very bad feeling. If she hadn't been on guard against Han Mingyue from the start and secretly made arrangements when she sensed something was wrong, she really would have fallen into Han Mingyue's hands this time. However, seeing Han Mingxi's weary expression due to his heavy injuries, she couldn't refuse. "He won't say anything. I can tell you whatever you want to know." After all, they were brothers who grew up together. Han Mingxi knew his big brother very well. If he didn't want to say something, he wouldn't say anything. "Han Mingxi, shut up." Han Mingyue, who was in the middle of the fight, shouted. Another new wound appeared on her shoulder. Seeing Han Mingyue's body gradually covered in wounds and being reprimanded by his brother again, Han Mingxi was finally furious. "You're the one who's going to shut up. If you want to die, don't drag the subordinates of the Tianyi Pavilion down with you. Look at all the people here. It's all because of you." The Tianyi Pavilion was based in the Dechu state. The Han clan was also based in the Dechu state. Was there something wrong with your head? Why did you provoke Emo Shuyao? Is that woman more important than your parents and ancestors? Fine, you want to die, right? I don't want to live anymore. I'll die with you. Han Mingyue was stunned by her brother's sudden outburst. A Black Cloud cavalry took the opportunity to kick him in the crook of his leg, and 3 blades were immediately placed against his neck. Han Mingyue lowered her head to look at the gleaming blade on her neck, before raising her head to look at Yili with a helpless smile. "Looks like I've lost again. If you want to kill me or beat me, do as you please." Han Mingxi, are you out of your mind? Don't make it sound like you're going to commit suicide." Han Mingxi thought back to the words he had scolded when he was in a towering rage, as well as the faintly discernible gazes of the Black Cloud cavalry beside him. His handsome face couldn't help but darken. He had lost all the face he had in his life today. Yili looked at the dark-faced Han Mingxi. She rolled her eyes and said, "Brother Han Mingxi, you can take young Master Mingyue away." Han Mingxi was overjoyed. He looked at Yili gratefully. Even Han Mingyue had a look of astonishment. Yili looked at Han Mingyue with a faint smile and said indifferently, "But there are conditions." Han Mingxi didn't expect Yili to be so agreeable. He didn't care about the conditions. He wasn't Han Mingyue, who loved money as much as his life. It was already a great surprise that his brother was still alive. Yili leisurely took out a small porcelain bottle and handed it to Han Mingxi. "Drink it." Han Mingxi raised his brows and drank it without hesitation. Han Mingyue wanted to stop him, but it was too late. Han Mingxi smacked his lips and said in disdain, "So disgusting." Yili smiled and said, "This is a poison personally made by the divine Dr. Shen Yang. The ingredients are a secret. As for the effects, if you don't take the antidote once a month, your meridians will rupture and your entire body will be paralyzed. Because the smell is too disgusting, it's hard for people to eat it by mistake, so it's not very practical. But there will always be people who are willing to eat it, right?" Han Mingxi giggled and said, "I know Junwei won't take my life." Yili raised her brows. "Watch your brother closely. I will send someone to deliver the medicine to you once a month. Once I find out when he leaves your sight or does something he shouldn't do, I will personally make him bleed. I will let him see with his own eyes that you are bleeding all over and in so much pain that you wish you were dead." Han Mingxi nodded and laughed. I understand. Big brother. For your only brother's life, you will be obedient, right? Blinking his bewitching eyes, he pitifully looked at Han Mingyue. Han Mingyue gloomily stared at Yili and said, How do I know you won't lie to me? Will you deliver the antidote on time? Yili lightly said, Han Mingxi is my friend. Han Mingyue sneered, Friend? Is this how you treat your friend? Yili lightly smiled and said, If you can treat your brother like that, why can't I treat my friend like that? If you don't do that, I naturally won't do that. In this way, Han Mingxi won't have any problems. Isn't that the same as, I didn't do anything? Han Mingyue narrowed her eyes. What if I find someone to make the antidote? I heard that this bottle of poison was made by Mr. Chen from a small island in the Eastern Sea. There is no similar medicine in the Central Plains. If Mr. Han is so resourceful that you can find the medicine and make the antidote in a month, then I will consider myself unlucky. Anyway, the Black Cloud Cavalry has tens of thousands of people, so it shouldn't be too hard to send out a few hundred to chase someone all year round. Coincidentally, I have a Yama's decree in my hands. I don't know if Pavilion Master Ling is willing to use this Yama's decree to kill his friend who used his brother. If I'm even more unlucky, the Ding Palace has plenty of money. Don't you think so, Mr. Han? Han Mingyue snorted and didn't say anything else. Han Mingxi didn't care at all and pushed away the sword on Han Mingyue's neck. He smiled at Yili and said, Junwei, don't worry. I guarantee that big brother won't ruin your plans again. If you want to know, I will send someone to bring it to you. So, Yili smiled and said, If you can really take care of your brother, I can forget about today's matter. But, if there is a next time, Brother Han, you won't use your please every time. I understand. Han Mingxi nodded seriously and reached out to seal Han Mingyue's pressure points to seal his internal energy. He waved his hand at Yili and pulled her away. This subordinate greets Princess. The Black Cloud Cavalry all bowed. Yili nodded, You can all stand up. What is going on with you? Seeing the fierce and awe-inspiring black-clothed cavalry, Yili praised them in her heart. As expected of the most elite army in the Dechu state. Just this aura alone wasn't something normal soldiers could compare to. Moreover, in the battle just now, the Black Cloud Cavalry had traveled a long way without any casualties. It was enough to see how strong this troop was. A strong man at the front stepped forward and said, Reporting to Princess, 3 days ago the Ling Province garrison suddenly launched an attack on Yong Province. At the same time, the Nanzhao army also began to attack Shattered Snow Pass. General Murong is guarding Shattered Snow Pass. The Nanzhao army has been attacking for a day and a night without any success. But, the Ling Province garrison has been unstoppable. I believe that they will reach Shattered Snow Pass in less than 10 days. At that time, General Murong will be attacked from both sides. Pass down the order. There's no need to go back to the city. Go directly to Snow Shattering Pass at the fastest speed. Yes. All of a sudden, the flames of war seemed to have ignited. Yili could not help but feel a little absent-minded. She raised her head and looked at the sky that was covered with dark clouds. Her heart grew heavier and heavier. Shattering Snow Pass on top of the sturdy and ancient mottled city walls. The soldiers stationed there gripped their swords and spears tightly and were ready for battle. Their young faces were stained with traces of exhaustion. Today they had repelled 3 attacks from the Nanzhao army and were ready to welcome the next wave of attacks. Murong Shen was 40 years old, and his angular face had a resolute expression. Holding a long spear in his hand, he walked on top of the city gate tower. His brows, as thick as knives, were tightly furrowed. From the day he was sent to guard Snow Shattering Pass, he knew that Snow Shattering Pass would not be peaceful. But he did not expect that the true danger would not only come from the restless Nanzhao, but also from the interior of Dechu State, the Emperor's younger brother, Prince Li. He couldn't help but think back to the anonymous letter he received when he left the capital. There were only 4 simple words on it. Be careful of Ling Zhou. So this was what it meant. The other party had long known that Prince Li had bad intentions, but unfortunately, he did not attract enough attention. Or rather, the circumstances did not allow him to pay attention. The Emperor needed him to guard the border. But because he had once competed with the previous Prince Ding, he was not willing to give him enough military power. The local officials also restricted him at every turn. And now, even though he knew that once Prince Li captured Yongzhou and formed an encirclement around Snow Shattering Pass, he had no way to retreat. Because in front of Snow Shattering Pass he had to face hundreds of thousands of Nanzhao people. Once they crossed Snow Shattering Pass, they would sweep through the entire south of Dechu state like a plague. Hopefully, the reinforcements could make it in time, father. A clear voice came from behind him. Murongxin turned around. Murongting, dressed in red, walked up the gate tower with a sword in her hand. Murongxin's face darkened. He said sternly, "What are you doing here? Go down." "Father." Murongting said firmly, "Daughter will guard the city with father." "Nonsense. I told you to leave Snow Shattering Pass immediately. Why haven't you left yet?" Murongxin loved his only daughter like a treasure. Now that Snow Shattering Pass was in danger, he had to stay and face his only daughter, but he wanted her to leave first. Murongting stubbornly bit the corner of her lips and said, "Ting is not unaware of the current situation. If I leave Snow Shattering Pass now and fall into Prince Li's hands and be used to threaten father, then daughter can only die." Seeing that Murongxin wanted to say something, Murongting interrupted him and said, "If father wants me to protect me back to the capital, then that's even more unacceptable. Now that the Nanzhao army is about to attack the city, it's time for people. Ting is the daughter of the general of Snow Shattering Pass, but you still have to take people who can be used to leave. If you do this, Ting is not worthy of being the daughter of the Murong family." Murongxin was speechless at his daughter's words. After a while he sighed and said, "Snow Shattering Pass is very dangerous now." Murongting said proudly, "When father goes to war, when is it not dangerous? Since father wants to guard Snow Shattering Pass, Ting as a descendant of a general, naturally can't retreat." Murongxin knew his daughter's temperament. He also knew that the road back to the capital was not safe. He could only sigh, "Forget it. Be careful." "Thank you, father." Seeing that Murongxin did not insist, Murongting was overjoyed. Ting will definitely not lose father's face. Okay, something bad has happened. Yi Li and the others rushed to Snow Shattering Pass without stopping. Nanzhao and Prince Li's attack was too sudden. When the Black Cloud cavalry entered Nanjiang, it had already attracted many people's attention. Naturally, it would not be as smooth as when they came. Yi Li could only take an air and San and a few Black Cloud cavalry soldiers. The others scattered and returned to Dongchu. What happened? Yi Li frowned and pulled on the reins. The Black Cloud cavalry soldier whispered, "Commander Wu Qingliang was assassinated. The reinforcements from Yongzhou were ambushed as soon as they crossed the river. The entire army was destroyed." Yi Li's heart trembled. "How far are we from Snow Shattering Pass now?" An heir said, "There's still half a day's journey. But Snow Shattering Pass has been surrounded by hundreds of thousands of Nanzhao soldiers. I'm afraid we won't be able to enter the pass even if we get there." Yi Li said, "Take a detour. Don't worry about Snow Shattering Pass. Go to Yonglin first. Prince Li's army should be arriving soon." "Yes, Wang Fei." Snow Shattering Pass was still the same as it was a few days ago. Sounds of killing and war drums shook the sky. Murongxin looked at the Nanzhao generals shouting at the city gates with a heavy expression. Staying in seclusion for several days in a row was a serious blow to the morale of the soldiers. Many of the generals by his side could not help but want to go out of the city to fight, but they were all stopped by him. "General, please let this subordinate go out of the city to fight." The young general pleaded firmly, his eyes filled with unyielding anger. The Nanzhao soldiers were shouting and cursing at the city gates every day, but they could only stay in seclusion. This made these young and aggressive soldiers hold a fire in their hearts.